Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yamina Revolution, and we got to deal with this situation, y'all. Israel has got the world shook. Nobody knows what to do. They all scared. Before we get into this, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. It's been a very long day for me, but I got to give y'all this geopolitical news the revolutionaries can use. It's a sad day for the revolution. It's a sad day for the anti-imperialist forces. Salute, salute, salute. It's a sad day for Salute Queen, everybody who want to live to see tomorrow. I don't know how long you got. I'm just telling y'all the truth. You see, I had to come on this platform today and just tell the truth because we family, right? Iran has been punked. The U.S. is some suckers. They scared to death. I don't know what Putin is thinking right now. He might be thinking he might as well shoot first because the world might be into some. The Middle East, they scared to death. They don't know what to do. China, they probably shook too. Israel has the whole world by the damn throat right now. And I don't care what we're finna get to this news. I just got to get y'all this. I don't know what the next move of the world leaders gonna do, but Israel got everybody in check because they got nuclear weapons, and they already showed what they're talking about. Now remember, the Iranian president was allegedly died in a plane crash. Anybody believe that? You crazy? They knocked him off. They knocked off the leader of Hamas. Now they knocked off the leader of Hezbollah. The only one left is the leader of Iran. And they just killed the president, but the supreme leader, Khomeini, I know he's scared to death right now. Salute. I know he's scared. But nobody takes the whole world looking at the U.S. like, this is y'all fault. Because we could have stopped it. But I just had to tell y'all and let y'all know the truth. Well, we finna list a whole bunch of revolutionaries. Yeah, they if Iran don't get busy right now, I don't want to hear shit from the Iranians no more. I don't want to hear we don't want to have the big war. Nigga, the big war here. Israel plan on killing all of y'all one by one. So the Iranians have no choice. The Syrians, y'all better get busy. Hezbollah, Yemen, they better throw everything they got. But they scared because the United States set a precedent in Hiroshima, y'all. They use nuclear weapons. I told y'all Israel has been doing everything the U.S. done did, and they saying the same fucking words because it's already a precedent done been set. So they paying attention that Israel absolutely is ready to nuke everybody because the U.S. said Israel has the right to defend itself, and then put on the record Israel's only defending itself. What a fucking U.S. done put us in a serious situation, y'all. But let's get to the news today. The Hezbollah, the great revolutionary leader, the anti-imperialist, has been murdered by the Zionists. That's why all the African leaders never stand up. Man, I didn't want to come here and tell y'all that the revolutionaries might be scared of Israel today, y'all.
Some breaking news just coming
the whole
to
world
me now.
Is scared of Israel.
It looks like we do now have that statement from Hezbollah confirming the death of Hassan Nasrallah. Bear with me. I'm just looking at this as it's coming in just now.
Ridiculous.
So this looks like it's a statement on Telegram that has come from Hezbollah suggesting that Hassan Nasrallah, or confirming that Hassan Nasrallah has been killed. So that is the latest that we're hearing from them. As we said, the Israeli Defense Forces said this morning that they had killed Hassan Nasrallah. But we are hearing now from Hezbollah, confirmation from Hezbollah. They are saying that Hassan Nasrallah, a significant moment, they say, was killed in that airstrike here in southern Beirut last night.
Made a big mistake, bro. Yeah, Hassan Nasrallah, the mistake he made was not going all out when they killed the leader of Hamas. This man is make his revolutionary name live forever. This man got into the fight for the Palestinians, man. This man is a Shiite. The Palestinians is Sunni. This man got into the fight against Israel because it was the right thing to do, and he done paid with his life. The mistake he made was listening to the fucking Iranians, because I'm pretty sure he been knowing they've been killing every general and all his people next to him. Pretty sure he been wanting to push the button and let those 100,000 missiles. They keep talking about Hezbollah got 100,000 missiles. They do. Who has been telling them not to fire them? You see? I know Putin not telling us. They got to stop telling these people, hold back. Ain't no hold back what? Israel's going to kill these people. Anybody who say you the leader, they're going to whack you. So if these people do not want to live under the thumb, this is, see, y'all witnesses, I swear to God, I don't even know if y'all going to be here next week. This is real broadcast. I'm telling y'all the truth. I don't know. Israel ready to nuke the fucking world. And U.S. gave them an excuse talking about they defending themselves. These people not defending themselves. These people killing people all over the fucking world right now.
Anna, thank you very much for that. We are just digesting that latest breaking news from Anna there. Just want to recap what we are hearing. This is from the Reuters news agency, a significant development. Lebanon's Hezbollah says its leader, Nasrallah, has been killed in a statement. They go on to say the group will continue.
Iran lied yesterday. Say you can't be. He lied yesterday. Told us that man was still alive. Man, why you do that to the revolutionaries? Tell the truth, man. Israel said he was dead. Now Israel beating their chest like fucking apes. Shamed all the revolutionaries, man. Because Iran lied and said the man was still alive. Yeah, bro. Why did you do that? You hurt you hurt your own people. Iran needs to. Hezbollah don't listen to Iran no more, man. Don't listen to Iran. That's serious business, man. I gotta look at the Iranian side. I'm side-eyeing the Iranians right now, nigga. That's serious fucking business, nigga. I'm looking at the Iranians with a side eye, nigga. That's serious business, man. Who knows what backroom deals been fucking made? Who knows what backroom deals been goddamn made, man? Iran needs to stop talking about it. The leader of Hezbollah has been whacked. Iran, you said you got a red line, bro. They didn't kill Nasrallah, man. You better let them motherfucking missiles go. I don't want to hear shit about they trying to stop the big war. Nigga, Israel don't care what they're trying to stop. Israel going to drag them to this war one way or the other. That's a fact.
And just repeating that Lebanon's Hezbollah says its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed. Now just hearing a news flash from the AFP news agency repeating the same information. So we've been waiting a couple of hours for any kind of formal confirmation from either Hezbollah or from Iran. And now it seems we have it. Let's cross back to Anna, who is still live for us in Beirut. So we have that confirmation from Hezbollah's point of view. What does this mean, Anna?
It is a hugely significant moment, Lewis, as we've been reflecting all morning. This is what Israel said several hours ago. They said that they had very precise and clear intelligence that Hassan Nasrallah had been killed. And as you say, we were really waiting for that confirmation from Hezbollah themselves. And it's nearly 24 hours now since that strike, but they have...
Man, people have been talking about winning wars. Man, these people don't give a fuck about winning no war. You see, that's what people losing the sight on what the Americans and the Zionists been doing. We can talk, they've been losing wars. They don't give a shit. They want endless wars and they want to destroy people's shit. They are not, we think about, oh, they're losing in Gaza. They tricked us. They tricked me, bro. They're not losing. They're on purpose. They're dragging that Gaza shit out. They don't want to finish it. They want to finish them. They don't want to hurry up. They want to kill them slow. They're not losing. I bet you Hezbollah know they're not losing. I bet the Iranians know they're not losing. No, they're not losing. They want forever wars, and they want to destroy every fucking thing in the Middle East, and they are doing it. And they got all of the people in the Middle East, even Iran, scared to get nuked, bro. I don't care what the fuck the Iranians say. They scared to die, man. And Israel proving it right now, nigga.
Released this statement. They say, Hezbollah, that their battle against Israel will continue. But the significance of this moment is sort of huge on several fronts. So let's just work through them for a moment. One is the actual organization itself. Now, it was interesting yesterday evening, in the first few hours after this strike, some of the rhetoric that was coming from Iran. They started talking about the fact that every leader, every organization had people ready to take over. And I think that was the first hint that Hassan Nasrallah may have been killed, and they were talking about the strength of the organization. But again, he was involved right from the start. He was involved in the inception of Hezbollah. It is his face that is on the posters that you see in the Hezbollah strongholds. It is his voice that delivers those speeches regularly. He is very much the figure.
Bro, I was reading about that man over 10 years ago, bro. Inspired by the Hezbollah movement, how they was a militia. I swear to God, inspired by how they was the strongest militia in the world, had more power than some armies. They took on the Israelis. This was inspiring, and it's all with the help of Hassan Nasrallah, the Great. But them being hesitant to go all out is getting all of their leaders killed, man. And they gonna have to do it. They ain't nothing to wait on. All they doing is waiting to die one by one. That's
figurehead of that organization. And
we've
been talking about several of the top commanders who have also been killed in Israeli strikes over the last few days, but none of them has the name or the face recognition of Hassan Nasrallah. So it will have an impact on the party. It will have an impact on the military organization. Hezbollah is, of course, a proscribed terrorist organization. It's important to remember.
It couldn't have been me, nigga. Hey, man, Nasrallah should have never listened to Iran or whoever. I wouldn't even listen to Putin. If Putin said, hold on, fuck that, nigga. They've been killing everybody. That man right there could have destroyed Tel Aviv right there. He had the power. I don't know why he was sitting here trying to play by the rules of engagement. They hit a military site, we hit a military. And that's what he was doing. Not understanding they got a bigger plan for you, bro. You tripping. That man that could have brought the world to World War III. He should have done it. What the hell? The world ain't ended for him. They better listen up right now. Fuck all that. I don't want to destroy my country. Your country is going to get destroyed and you're going to die if you don't make sure Israel go with you. That's just the truth. Iran, right now, they got to do the right thing, bro. Iran got to do the right motherfucking thing. Quit worrying about tomorrow. Do the right thing, Iran. I know Israel might nuke you, but you've been promising to just flatten Tel Aviv, nigga. Talk is cheap, nigga.
Among various governments around the world, but also a political party as well here in Lebanon. So it will be interesting to see the impact it has on Hezbollah, but also in terms of potential response, because he is a significant figure here in the Middle East in that axis of resistance, the Iranian axis of resistance that brings in Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, Iranian-backed militias in places like Iraq and Syria. So the question now, I think, will be what calculations Iran will make. Now, bear in mind, Ismail Haniyeh, who was a significant...
Benjamin Yahoo just said at the UN, nigga, it's nowhere in Iran that is safe from the long arms of Israel. He talking to the supreme leader, Khomeini. He letting Khomeini know, we're going to get you too. He letting Khomeini know. And Iranians, shame on them saying that their president died in a fucking plane crash. Man, stop telling that lie, man. You know Israel assassinated your fucking president and your foreign minister. And I'm the only one who said that. And I'm going to continue to say it. And years from now, people going to be like, man, that dude cold figure. All right, nigga, stop pretending like your president died in a plane crash, nigga. You know damn well you attacked Israel with the fucking missiles, and Israel killed your president. Israel killed the president of Iran. Israel killed the leader of Hamas, and Israel killed the leader of Hezbollah. They need to face it. I know it's humiliating, but shit, all that tough talk, bro. You see what's happening here? I want Africa to pay attention to what not to do. Don't listen to Putin or nobody else. Don't be so patient, because your world will end. Hell no, man. No, everybody got to go. Shit.
Significant figure in Hamas. He was their political leader, one of the top two, along with Yahya Sinwar. He was also killed Israel they didn't claim the strike, but he was killed, Ismail Haniyeh, a few weeks ago. And there hasn't yet been what you would describe as a formal, significant response to that.
Nah, so I think shit. Hell no, they ain't did shit. Man, fuck the BRICS. We've been thinking, well, they ain't gonna do no BRICS meet, man. In Israel, there won't be no BRICS meet, nigga. Israel talking about killing everybody. Shit, ain't gonna be no BRICS. Shit, BRICS. These people ain't ever gonna be alive for that. Israel is on a war path, man. They ain't playing. No, they ain't playing it. And who cares? They got nuclear weapons. People better get busy. Iran better have like business.
By the Israelis first and confirmed by Hezbollah, they hit residences in the Dahia area of Beirut with around 10 bombs. And this is only the latest in a series of assassinations on Hezbollah leader. But specifically, the magnitude of this assassination, what do you think that means for Hezbollah as a movement and the axis of resistance at large?
Well, first of all, sorry for the background noise, but I'm in someone's home because
right now I wouldn't even listen to Putin, bro. Y'all know how I cover the revolutionary big homie Putin. I wouldn't listen to him because he think about himself. He think about his people. If I was Iran, if Putin told him hold back, I would not listen to that nigga, bro. And I can't blame him. He think about the existence of his people. Man, everybody got to think about the existence of their people, man. And Israel not playing games with nobody, man. And the U.S., man, they gonna, bro, we in real danger because now the whole world see, man. But Israel got to go, the U.S. got to go too. This did not have to, all these assassins. And let me tell you this. Now the world can see Israel absolutely baited Hamas into committing October the 7th. Now people thought, man, how could the Hamas have defeated the high-tech Israeli army? That wasn't no mistake. Now you see? Do you see what happened? Hamas got to get their little action on that day one, and it's been all bad news for them. Yeah, Israel been dying. The powers that be that run Israel, they don't give a fuck about them petty punk-ass soldiers of theirs. They have killed all of their enemies' leaders since October the 7th. That's a fact. Leaders. They have killed almost 100,000 Palestinians, starved millions, treat them like they're in a concentration camp and the world can do nothing. Salute. Can watch. Israel baited Hamas. That was a mistake. The whole world, I bet you they regret because they're not willing to die. And I'm sitting like, damn, I thought them people, that was a martyr society. That your full court figure. I thought they was ready to go to Allah and meet their maker in front of the cause. It don't seem like that. And that's just the fucking truth, because the truth is going to be told in this video because I'm pissed about what happened in Israel. That's the revolutionary OG. If they so-called ready to die and be martyrs, they got to attack Israel with everything they got. Who cares if you get nuked, bro? You supposed to be ready.
Was right beside a petrol station.
They must put it in.
And there was fear that the Israelis would bomb it, or there's still fear that they will bomb it. So we all moved away, and now I'm staying with a kind family who's forced to bear with me. I think it's
me too. I'm hurt. I'm shocked too, bro. That's why
quite clear that
is fucked up.
What the Israeli regime did was a major crime against humanity. They used a large number of bunker busters.
Israel didn't expose these people, man,
to destroy a number of residential
they don't want to die,
towers.
Bro.
I was
they
about
scared to death in the Middle East. I'm saying that they want to die
from the place where the bomb struck. And I know that neighborhood pretty well because I lived.
Israel finna finish them off too. Israel finna get everything they wanted. They done went to the max. Nobody can stop them. Putin, and Putin too busy with his own shit right now. You know, as long as they don't try to kill Assad. Now, if they try to kill Assad in Syria, Putin might nuke him his goddamn self. If they don't try to kill Assad in Syria, Putin might just keep dealing with Ukraine. Iran supposed to be the big dog. Nasrallah, damn, Iran, he supposed to be under y'all protection. The leader of Hamas died in Iran. He supposed to be under y'all protection. I ain't gonna lie. If I was an ally of Iran, I would be like, bro, I don't think that you're gonna do what you say you're gonna do, nigga. All of your organizations that you working with, the Axis of Resistance, they gonna watch. They gonna try to kill the leader of the Yemeni rebels, the Houthi rebels. Watch. I told y'all, just like Nasrallah, he be deep underground. Man, they just proved, bro. They get your ass underground, nigga. They just proved it. So Iran gotta stop. I don't want to hear shit from them, bro. I ain't gonna lie, man. I'm gonna be very sour on Iran until some shit happen. That's just what it's gonna be, nigga. It's revolutionary, nigga. Don't be going to Africa with all your bullshit getting the Africans to stand. For they couldn't have the Africans trying to stand up straight, and the allies not ready to go all out. I don't want the Africans paying the ultimate price because people ain't ready to do it. This serious business, man. The whole world can change if the revolutionaries don't attack Israel. If they don't attack, man, them bastards going back into slavery, man.
Near there
Serious
during
business.
My sabbatical here in Beirut, I think hundreds of people died, all families, but they're not really important to the West, and they're definitely not important to the Israeli regime. So in order to murder Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the great hero of Palestine for the Palestinian cause of our era, in order to murder him, they sacrificed hundreds of people. They were willing to slaughter hundreds of people. And if you follow Western media, you see that it doesn't bother them at all. And they're busy trying to justify these crimes. And they even tried to say that Hezbollah, repeating the Israeli narrative, that Hezbollah is embedded in the local population. They use terms like Hezbollah target sites, or they use terms like a Hezbollah stronghold to describe Dahiya, southern Beirut. But the reality is that in Beirut, just like in Tel Aviv, Hezbollah has a presence. Just like in any country, in any capital in the world, there are armed forces, there are intelligence agencies. But in the case of, let's say, Israel, they don't say they're embedded in the population. But in the case of Hezbollah, they say otherwise. The Israeli regime did succeed in murdering him and a number of other people around him, obviously. But it is not going to change the equation. Hezbollah is a very powerful organization. It is a very large organization. Its members are very dedicated to the cause. They're highly educated. And they are determined to end.
What's the cause? Iranian professor, and this is a professor, I cut for Professor Marandi, but more propaganda that dedicated to the cause. What's the cause? You talk about liberate Palestine. You can't do that without your armies. Palestinians are dying daily. Hezbollah is getting wiped out. What the fuck are you? See, this got to stop. This is getting people killed, brother. This is getting people killed. Iran got to fucking quit talking. The time is now. The time is now. No more talk. They're going to stay the course. What fucking course? Israel killing everybody, wiping out all the innocent people, genociding. What the hell are they talking about, man? No, not on this program. We're not doing that. No, my people got to know the truth. No, hell no. Hell no. No, the Muslim armies got to back that fucking shit up. Because they're supposed to be a martyr society who don't mind dying for Allah. That's what they preach. But the world see differently. The world see differently, man. Now they up against it now. Because Israel ain't just sitting back waiting on nothing. Israel is dragging their ass to this wall, kicking and screaming. One leader after another one. And Khomeini, the supreme leader, he the only one left.
The genocide in Gaza. Sayyid Hassan entered this war willingly. In other words, Hezbollah sacrificed itself, or made sacrifices to be more precise, in order to help protect the Palestinian people of Gaza. When the genocide began, Hezbollah began fighting on the border in order to draw away a large segment of the Israeli military, thus helping Hamas and Islamic Jihad and other resistance groups.
The Iranians, and I cut for the Iranian military. I'm trying to find out what's going on in Iran, bro. You know what I'm saying? Because in a higher understanding, I do know that it's individuals in Iran who just like individuals in the House of Saudi Arabia are actually the same people that they are saying that they are fighting in Tel Aviv. That's for another conversation, a different day. That's absolutely a fact. A lot of these individuals, you know, I tell you, I could set a bunch of these people on TV, and you wouldn't know who is the Israeli and who is the Saudi and who is the Iranian. And that's true. A bunch of them, you'd be like, what the fuck is going on here, man? Look.
To battle the enemy and also to help protect more civilians. And during the last 11 months, over 11 months, they had many martyrs, and of course, many Hezbollah supporters, civilians in Lebanon were martyred as well. Obviously, contrary to what Hezbollah's enemies were claiming, bad faith actors, Hezbollah had a huge impact on the battle inside Palestine. Otherwise, the Israeli regime, wouldn't have carried out such harsh acts of revenge. But the important point here that I want to stress is that Beirut is the weakest link for Hezbollah. Why? Because all of the Western embassies are in Beirut. And they're all working together, gathering intelligence against the resistance. They've been doing that for decades, all Western embassies and some regional embassies. On the other hand, many of these Western NGOs, they are intelligence gathering bodies, and they're also working against Hezbollah. And Beirut is a city where people can come and go freely. In addition to that, you have a government in Lebanon that consists of different factions. Some of them are being very pro-Western. And then you also have the groups that assisted the Israelis during the 1982 invasion on Lebanon, and who actually carried out a massacre in the Sabra and Shatila Palestinian refugee camps, which led to the slaughter of roughly 4,000 people back then. So these people are, they have militias, they are closely affiliated to Western embassies, and they are obviously working with the West against Hezbollah. So you have Western embassies, you have Western intelligence agencies, you have the Five Eyes, you have NGOs, and you have these sinister militias that slaughtered Palestinians during the previous invasion of Lebanon in 1982. So that makes Beirut much more difficult for Hezbollah to protect, and also to make sure that the enemy is not able to gather intelligence. However, Hezbollah's military infrastructure, which is extensive, it's massive, and they have thousands of kilometers of underground tunnels throughout southern and central Lebanon. These are very well protected. These are very difficult for the Israeli regime to penetrate, because it's not like Beirut. So if the regime does choose to invade Lebanon, it will be very difficult. And the resistance, the military wing of the resistance, will definitely defeat the regime. And the collective resistance, as Ayatollah Khamenei has said today, the axis of resistance, they will all assist Hezbollah if the Israeli regime carries out the invasion, whether it's in Yemen, whether it's in Iraq or Syria, or of course Iran, and in the West Bank and Gaza. They're all working together to defeat this criminal.
Now, why would Israel invade Lebanon when they could just sit back and kill them? Bob, they got all the missiles they ever wanted with the U.S. and the NATO. They could just sit back and kill them, pick them off like they're doing. Why? See, that's just mental, more psychological trauma that Israel is doing to them, preparing you for an invasion that's not going to happen as they continue to massacre them every day.
Regime. So I would not.
And it showed the hand of Hezbollah. They keep talking about an invasion, you're supposed to be firing thousands of missiles. Quit worrying about, see, these people are talking about defense and Israel is on the offense. They're not talking about no offense. That's the fucking problem. If Israel tries to invade, man, why y'all ain't invading Israel, nigga?
Those who say that the enemy has penetrated Hezbollah, anyone who's visited Beirut, anyone who knows Beirut, knows that it is very difficult to hide information from the enemy. They have so many different means to gather intelligence. And of course, Western spy planes and drones are flying alongside the Mediterranean coast, constantly gathering information, alongside, as I said earlier, the Five Eyes. So Hezbollah is it's a very difficult position. And in general, the axis of resistance is in a very difficult position. This is Iran and its allies working against the collective West. And unfortunately, regional countries have either disappointed us, like Turkey, where they continue to send oil from Baku, cheap oil from Baku to Israel, or the Emirates, which is in open betrayal, and Jordan and Egypt and other countries. So it is a heavy burden for the resistance to stand up against such a powerful enemy. It's not the Israeli regime. It is the collective West. Anyone who thinks that this is Hezbollah or the resistance against the Israeli regime really doesn't know what's going on. This is about the collective West, which is hell-bent on preserving an ethno-supremacist regime, which is not really, it's not really one ethnicity. These people came from Europe, they came from Arab countries that are not Semites necessarily, and so they're less Semites than the indigenous Palestinian population. But that aside, they are hell-bent, the collective West, on preserving this ethno-supremacist, racist regime. And but I am confident that the axis of resistance will maintain its strength and it will gain the upper hand.
We saw over these last weeks Israel continuously escalate. We started with the pager attacks on the 17th of September, and then there were several massacres.
That is a wish. They wish to get the upper hand on Israel. How? You're not assassinating Israel leaders. They're assassinating your leaders. They're putting the pressure. They're putting you under full court pressure. It's just nonsense. The Iranians got to stop this bullshit. Professor, I know he hurt and he want to try to make people feel good. Hey, that's not what the battlefield is showing. You don't look like you're going to get the upper hand on people who can assassinate your leaders at will, even in Iran. Come on now.
After that, they killed over 700 so far, and the number is rising, obviously, with the death count with the attack from yesterday. Why would Hassan Nasrallah put himself in such a vulnerable position in Beirut when he knows how difficult it is to keep everything under wraps in terms of information and intelligence?
Well, first of all, the slaughter continues today in Dahia nearby. They are continuing to bomb residential buildings, and they are bombing the city's infrastructure and slaughtering people at will. So it's been all night and today.
See what I'm saying? Look, then he tell you Israel haven't stopped slaughtering. Come on, bro. What the fuck are you waiting on? They got to be out of their mind if they think that they're going to sit back and we're going to wait on Israel to invade. Israel ain't got to invade you. They're going to keep killing you everywhere, all over the Middle East, as they're doing. Iran, oh man, this is crazy. I'm shocked, y'all. That's why this is very emotional live, because they'll let me down. And I want the African revolutionaries, and Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, please pay attention. Please pay attention. Don't listen to outsider strategy. It gets your leaders whacked. Get if you're going to die, everybody got to die. And Nasrallah had the power to take Israel with him, and he, for some foolish reason, was listening to outsiders tell him the time is what now. Just wait. Just on the BRIC summit. Fuck the BRIC summit, any other summit. When they want to kill you. And to right now, I'm not seeing on the news 50,000 missiles launched at Israel. We probably seeing that. They got that type of power. If Israel would nuke us, Israel gonna kill you anyway, bro. So you got to get yours while you can, man.
Hey,
I thought
and
it was
of course
ready to
they're
die,
doing the same across the country. There's no accountability, and the Americans, the Europeans, the British, the Germans are swiftly bringing in more.
America not gonna save you, bro. You see, blaming America, that's not gonna help. Blaming Germany and France and Britain, that's not gonna help. Y'all gotta fight them people, bro. I don't think they understand. You're not gonna shame U.S. You're not gonna. Who gives a fuck about the UN? Take them to the United Nations, bro. All that shit. That's not for y'all. That's for Americans to do to y'all. Y'all gotta understand. They gotta understand what's going on here, bro. Don't look for America to stop Israel. They are watching them kids get killed every day. They don't give a shit in the American Congress. That's what these people understand. Israel is attacking them. Israel is attacking them, and they got to fight back. They're going to have to stand up. They're going to stand up for themselves. The Arabs, the Muslims, they got to stand up for themselves, bro. The world is watching, and they looking weak, pathetic. I thought they was a martyr society ready to meet Allah on the battlefield. They not. That's crazy. They not. That's a fact.
Ammunition, more bunker busters, and the capability to continue the slaughter. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, of course, I'm not privy to secret information of Hezbollah or Iran, but I think the reason why he was based in Beirut is because he's not the military commander. He's the overall leader. So he has to deal with different political parties. He has to coordinate with different people. He works closely with Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, which both have a strong presence in Lebanon and are supported by Hezbollah, and of course other Palestinian factions, but also different political parties in Lebanon, especially allies of Hezbollah within the different communities. So his job is not simply to lead the defense of Lebanon or to lead the defense against this Zionist regime, but he is also there to coordinate politicians, different political parties, and so on. So, and maybe no one expected this attack to be carried out at that time, or maybe they didn't know that the regime could penetrate so deep. I don't know that part, but I don't know what we'll find out about these things in the years to come, after the war is over and hopefully after this Israeli regime is defeated. Gradually, we'll learn about what was happening behind the scenes. But his responsibility is not just military, so I assume that's why he was in Beirut at that time, at least.
Yesterday, Netanyahu made a speech at the United Nations, deranged, genocidal speech as usual, and he then later, presumably from within the United Nations compound, made the order or gave the go-ahead for this attack on Dahia, killing many hundreds, and Hassan Nasrallah among others from Hezbollah. What do you think this means for international law at large?
There is no international law. Western liberal democracies have shown themselves for what they really are. They are despicable regimes that are genocidal and that are as genocidal as the Israeli regime. They are equal partners in the genocide in Gaza and the massacres that we're seeing in Lebanon and in Syria. They're regularly bombing Syria, murdering Syrians, and the West doesn't care. They allow Israel to do whatever it wants. Israel can do anything. It can They will.
See, you see, this is the professor. This is the wise wizard of Iran. I cut for him. He didn't taught me so much about Iran, but he doesn't understand. We could smell and hear the fear. The West is letting Israel do whatever they want to do. No, your society is supposed to be stopping Israel. I don't understand why they think the West is going to stop Israel. You're supposed to stop Israel. Iran, the axis of resistance, the Middle East, nations supposed to stop Israel, not the West. They should never think the West is going. Why should the West stop their colony? They created Israel. And Israel is paying good dividends to them. You know how long they've been waiting to finish y'all off and destroy y'all civilizations? And that is what's happening before our very eyes. As we can see, Iran is only worried about somebody not going into Iran and toppling them. You see? Iran, and when they killed Soleimani, when Trump ordered that, and Trump was wrong the motherfucker. When they killed Soleimani, it was supposed to be all out war. Nigga, Soleimani was the big dog. Who was fighting ISIS? They let Soleimani kill. They let Soleimani get killed. They just attacked some American bases. Didn't kill him. Man, that's bullshit, bro. They just worried about don't attack their nation. They showing their hand. And Israel is reading them. Israel reading them. And Israel smell fear. That's serious business. And Khomeini, mark my word, the Iranian supreme leader, he next. He next. He know that.
Help and support Israel to the last Palestinian and to the last Lebanese citizen and to the last Jordanian. That we've seen that.
Come on,
they've been carrying out a year of genocide in front of our eyes. And the West has not imposed any sanctions. In fact, they're just giving more and more assistance of all sorts. As I said, intelligence, ammunitions, weapons, political assistance, and financial aid. They're giving, and of course, media. So the West is all in on this genocide. There is no international law. There never was international law. The very existence of the Israeli regime and the fact that the West has always tried to make it thrive, despite it being a racist regime, it shows that international law never really meant anything. But what is happening is that the world is changing. Not only is the balance of power shifting away from the West is on economic decline, its military is declining, as we're seeing in Ukraine, and with regards to its potential conflict with China. But also its soft power is being destroyed, or it has already been destroyed, because people across the world are seeing the West being an equal partner in genocide.
See, what they don't understand about that, Putin had to kick their ass to break them. Oh, fuck. They're not going down just because people click their heels and say, there's no place like home, and it happened. No. Putin had to get in the battlefield, and Putin said enough was enough and called a bluff and put his war machine. That's what Iran got to do, homie. Iran has to say enough is enough and put their war machine into the field against Israel. And I don't give a shit if Israel got nukes. Y'all are a martyr society who done sold to the world. Y'all ready to die and be on behalf of the prophet, on behalf of Muslims all over the place. There's a genocide going on. All of y'all leaders get knocked off. You're not getting out of this one. The revolutionaries is paying attention. And we will never believe you will fight on behalf of us in Africa or us over here or us anywhere if you won't fight for your goddamn self.
And that's, I think, one reason why the UN...
I would recommend that the revolutionaries of Africa pay attention. If the Iranians and if the Islamic brothers and sisters do not fight back from the Middle East, we don't need their help in Africa, because they would only be trying to manipulate and get back in Africa. Fuck all that. We don't need that type of bullshit. No, you have to be willing to fight for yourself before you could ever help us.
In the UN, so many diplomats left the hall. I think that is symbolic of a changing world. The United States and Europeans definitely did not want such scenes in the UN, but they happened. And I think that immediately afterwards, when Netanyahu carried out that crime from the UN building, he is only diminishing the Israeli regime further. The Israeli regime has lost this war. They've lost on the border with Lebanon, they've lost in Gaza, they've lost in the West Bank, and they've lost in the Red Sea.
I was saying that too. They were losing. But we got to look at this as, well, like Edward Snowden said. Edward Snowden said they don't want to win wars. They want forever wars. We got to look at the U.S. We laugh all the time. You ain't won no war. They don't care. They got trillions of dollars out of every war and murdered millions of people. They don't give a damn. That is a win. Trillions of dollars and mass destruction. That's a win. They don't care if you keep your brutalized property that's got depleted uranium all over your land. Who cares? Iraq won the war. The U.S. still there taking their oil. Huh? No. We got to look at this as these people are the destroyers of civilizations. That's the win for them. And there's nowhere in hell we can sit here and say they losing the war in Gaza. How? When the people is starving. And the fighters, they hide on the ground. They brave soldiers. Hamas braver than a bitch. But all their family dying. All their children dying. All their grandmothers, grandfathers. They barely got bread and meat, bread and potatoes. That ain't no damn win. If anybody living, I know they got to say whatever they can say to keep the motivation going, but I'm sitting back like, no, that's no way to win. But these people want to sit here from their professor, you cushy in Iran, nice home, eating good, talking about Hamas is winning. Tell it to Nasrallah. Tell Nasrallah that they winning. Oh, you can't. Because he died listening to y'all.
Of course, the Americans
should have let 100,000 missiles and rockets go at Israel, then paid the price, but it wouldn't be no Tel Aviv right now.
The British are fighting on their behalf in the Red Sea, killing Yemeni civilians and soldiers in order to allow Israeli shipping to go through. But they've been defeated there, the Americans and the British. So they've lost on all fronts. Their economy has been wrecked, as we all know. But I think the most important, and their military, they have their military and intelligence. They may pretend that they've had successes, or they may have had.
Don't do this to yourself, Professor. Don't do this to yourself. Israeli intelligence is the best in the world. Once again, they have been proving it. Nigga, they killed Hamas leader in the heart of Iran. Nigga, y'all still don't know how it happened. Your president got whacked on a plane. Y'all came out and said it was an accident. You know Israel killed them. What? They just knocked off Nasrallah, found right where he was at, and went deep in the ground and killed them. You want to pretend like Israel don't have the best intelligence? They have the best. And what happened on October the 7th was not a mistake. They did it on purpose. They baited Hamas in so they can kill everybody, murder all their enemies, get hundreds of billions from the U.S. and weaponry to do it. They're not losing, and people got to face the fact they're not losing, bro.
Had successes, let's say.
They got the world on their knees. How the fuck?
But their military is tired. It's worn out.
No, they're not.
They will see in the coming weeks that they will not succeed. But the most important thing I think that has changed is that the world despises Israel across the global south.
What does that matter? So
even in India, things have changed.
So
and even in the West, as I'm sure you know better than I, young people in particular, Jews, Christians, Muslims, everyone, people from all walks of life, they're changing. And this is devastating for the regime. It is being increasingly seen as illegitimate, and that's why Hezbollah is becoming so popular. That's why Ansar Allah, which was an obscure name for most, became a hero to many people even outside the region, at least those who are politically active. So, despite the setbacks and this pain and the suffering that we're seeing, I know a couple of people who were martyred in the last 24 hours. This is very painful for everyone, but the resistance will prevail, and the resistance is determined to liberate the people of Palestine.
This is very painful for me. I can't believe y'all faking over there in Iran. Y'all have hurt King Yahshua. How could you be phony? People needed you to be lions in the face of death. You scared of Israel. Nasrallah is dead, bro. Wake up. Khomeini is next. Don't y'all see that? You don't see where it's going? You don't understand what Israel is finna do to you? All this time y'all thought y'all had, you don't. October the 7th was the best thing ever happened to Israel. They got a gift. They allowed it to happen. Now, just like America went nuts after September the 11th. And George Bush said, you either with us or you against us. You with the terrorists. And the whole world was scared and got the fuck out the way because they knew we would nuke your ass. You with the terrorists. That's what Israel is saying right now. And America has backed them and said, Israel got the right to defend themselves. So Israel's saying, yeah, and we will nuke you to defend ourselves, you damn terrorists. Come on, man. Iran had got to make the choice. Do they want to die fighting or do they just want to die?
And that will happen. Israel will not win this war.
Salute.
And it cannot afford not to win. If it does not win, then it has lost the war. And so far, it's clear that it is losing the war.
Man, Israel gonna nuke these people.
You mentioned the reactions to Israel from the global south. Yesterday,
they scared to
Blinken shamelessly
just nuke them anyway.
Rebuked Iran and China for selling arms to Russia.
Israel not gonna let Iran. I swear to God, people. Israel not gonna let Iran off the hook. No, you gotta fight. They want to destroy you, bro. I don't know what plan Israel got, but it's all out war. So Iran got to prepare for a lot of their civilization to die. We don't know what type of civilization will come from Iran after this, but they got to prepare themselves and let loose their missiles and all their weapons of war. Or Israel's just going to kill them and the Iranians are going to be shamed for 1,000 years.
When his government recently pledged to give the Israeli occupation $8.7 billion in military aid as it continues the genocide, how do you think the global south will react to this blatant hypocrisy from the United States?
I think everyone sees through it now. The world has changed. Blinken is a Zionist, and his loyalty is to Israel. In fact, Western leaders, their loyalty to Israel is greater than their loyalty to their own people. For example, the Israelis have compromised the production chains or the business chains for electronic goods. They have turned electronic products into weapons. These are Western goods. This, one was made in Taiwan, the other one I think maybe in Japan, but it doesn't really matter. No one in the West has punished the Israeli regime. So the West has allowed electronic goods produced by Western companies or companies belonging to regimes loyal to the West to be weaponized. That destroys Western brands. I personally and many people who I know will no longer be purchasing anything from the West because it's simply too dangerous. Purchasing perhaps Chinese brands or other brands that are not compromised. The supply chains of all these companies now are questionable, to say the least. But ordinarily, if this had happened, if any other country had or any other regime had done this, there would be outrage in the West, and all the companies and the governments would be out to.
Look, I don't know. Professor, man, what the hell are you talking about, man? You jealous of Israel? This nigga jealous that Israel can do whatever it want and not punish for. This is crazy. This is crazy. What the fuck are you talking about, Professor? We're not gonna be buying stuff. And what are you buying from the West for you? Why y'all keep buying from people who don't like you and who want to see you dead and who hate your civilization? Why? You see what happened? See what happened? Y'all want to be white so damn bad, Aryans. You Aryans, y'all want to be white. So you want to be white, don't y'all? And you mad? They don't like you. That's like Turkey. Turkey's so pissed they won't let them into the European Union. Y'all ass, they don't like you. What's your stand about that? You turn into Muslims. They don't like that. Don't you know there's a class of civilizations? Don't you know in the update of the Holy Wars, you're getting your ass kicked. They're brutalizing Muslims in the mosque. You understand that? They're killing holy leaders. And you're doing nothing. And y'all want them to be shamed by the world. Don't be counting on South America and Africa. See, this got to stop. Now I see what y'all been wanting. They're talking about the global South. And what? We're not going to fight for you. We thought we were fighting together. We're not going to fight for you. You thought, I see. You want us to what? Fight the Americans for you? You want us to fight the Israelis and y'all won't even fight for Nasrallah? Y'all won't even fight for the Palestinians? Y'all just going to give them some help? Nah, we don't want that type of help, brother.
To find out who did this and severely punish them. But in the case of Israel, they let them get away with it. So they're hurting their own brand because people no longer trust these companies. And they let the Israeli regime do this sort of thing. So the Israelis are always sacrificing the West for their own selfish gains. And the West is always sacrificing, Western regimes are sacrificing their own people for the Israeli regime. And Blinken is just one of those people. He is a Zionist. And his interests are more about preserving the Israeli regime than about strengthening the United States.
The United States administration has been continuously calling for calm, at least in public. They are they don't seem to want a regional war. They say they're working towards a ceasefire agreement, and then Israel goes ahead and starts this escalation with Hezbollah in the north. Hezbollah obviously is much more powerful than Hamas. Why would Israel go ahead with this escalation in the north and then go and
right now
assassinate the leader
They're not doing
of
shit.
The largest and most powerful?
Serious business. Our lifetime, we watching Israel handle these people rough, bro. Massacre women and kids every day, and these people run on TV and whine and complain and talk about sanctions and that. Enough is enough. They're getting disgusting. I'm getting kind of like pissed. I'm like, this is a new day now. Killing this raw. Like, all right, what? I don't want to hear about Israel. We just want to talk about y'all ass now. Why the fuck y'all not standing up and fighting? All them kids is dying in Palestine. This is ridiculous. Why they haven't marched their armies to war? No, the world shouldn't stop and help. No, the South Africa shouldn't do nothing. This is pathetic. That's serious goddamn business, man. No, hell no, man. Y'all got enough weapons and everything, man. These people don't want to die, man. I'm really shocked, man. I thought these people was about that action, bro. They don't want to die. These people want to live. Man, every person should want to, but goddamn, bro, y'all been talking shit. Israel on the warpath. Man, this is the supreme leader of Iran had the nerve to come out and say all Muslims should now stand and fight against. I said, what, man? Oh, man, if you, boy, what you say? Supreme leader, if you don't send 1 million, 2 of your soldiers to go fight Israel, quit calling on the Muslim world. Nigga, you is the Muslim world. You're the leader of the Shiites. Fuck are you talking about? That's disgusting. This nigga, the leader of the Shiites, said the Muslim world should now, man, nigga, they just killed Nasrallah, nigga, the number 2 Shiite in the world. What you gonna do? You number 1.
Resistance faction in the region.
Well, this is in response to the fact that Netanyahu is very unpopular, and he knows that if he is forced to step down at some point, he'll probably go to jail for corruption charges. Not because of the genocide. Israelis support the genocide.
And nobody
his right-wing fanatical allies support the genocide, and his liberal opposition, for the most part, supports the genocide. We should not be under any illusion that his opponents, his political opponents, are any better than him. But he either has to continue the war or escalate. And when you continue a war after a year and nothing happens, then I think you have to escalate. You either have to ultimately end it or you have to escalate. And that, I think, it was predictable that he would escalate. Maybe different people would have different views on when the Israeli regime would escalate, or how it would escalate, or how far it would escalate. But I think right now there's a very high chance that the regime will actually invade southern Lebanon. So we're going to see probably very heavy fighting in the days and weeks ahead here. And of course, the airstrikes continue, the slaughter of civilians continue across the country. And the West
do. They're just gonna keep slaughtering them. They're not gonna invade Lebanon. That's dumb. Then Hezbollah gonna fight like hell to see. You fight like hell when you trap. That's how Israel lost the first time. They don't have to do that. They can sit back and just kill all of y'all, kill your families, and you not gonna come and meet them, and you're not gonna invade Israel. What you waiting for? Come on, man. We gotta stop. Israel got their number, bro. Israel got their number. These people scared to die, bro. They want the U.S. to stop Israel. It's never gonna happen. Man. Y'all gotta fight this fight, or y'all gonna die.
Western media will do as much as possible to hide this from their own people and from the international community. And it is our responsibility to constantly keep people aware about the genocide, the ongoing genocide in Gaza, the massacres in Lebanon, and of course the regular aggressions on Syria. Syria, of course, the reason why the regime constantly bombs it is because Syria is a sort of victory bridge that links Iran to Lebanon. And of course, the assistance that goes to the West Bank most probably goes through Syria, although I'm not privy to this sort of thing, this sort of information. And of course, Lebanon as well. And that's why they actually carried out the dirty war in Syria. NATO led it. Now back then, a lot of people viewed the world differently, even though I think it was pretty clear back then what was happening. But NATO wanted to undermine Syria because they wanted to cut the link between Iran and Lebanon and Palestine. And by doing that, they could much more easily defeat Hamas and, of course, hurt and Hezbollah.
Yeah, and Putin had to step in because Iran couldn't handle the motherfucking job. They didn't want to go all out. So Soleimani went asked Putin to step in. Yeah, the Christians was getting their heads chopped off. So when Putin heard that they was over there chopping off the Christians' heads and he wanted to save his ally Assad, so he stepped in. But Iran could have sent millions of troops. They didn't. They let the U.S. bluff them in, man.
And this Islamic Jihad and the other groups in the West Bank.
You gotta ask yourself this: Iran got air defense systems. They make air defense systems. Why the fuck they never sent none to Lebanon? Why Lebanon don't have air defense systems, man? Come on, man. What kind of games y'all playing, man?
That are very active, but they failed. So NATO carried out this dirty war. They empowered ISIS and Al Qaeda. We all know that Jake Sullivan, the current national security advisor, and the Zionists said on February the 12th, 2012, in an email to Hillary Clinton that in Syria, Al Qaeda is on our side. And of course, they brought about the empowerment of ISIS. John Kerry, the Secretary of State at that time, said we allowed ISIS to advance on Damascus. And Obama even said that in an interview, I think, in the Atlantic magazine, that they allowed ISIS to advance on Baghdad in order to put pressure on the prime minister. So the West used these extremist groups, terror groups, to destroy Syria. And sadly, countries in the region, they did a deal with the devil. But today, Syria remains a very important part of the Axis, and it allows assistance to go to the resistance in different parts of the region.
Returning to Hezbollah, while Hassan Nasrallah is possibly the largest blow to Hezbollah as a resistance movement, he's not the first top commander to be assassinated. We've been seeing many assassinations going all the way back to July with Fuad Shukr. But Hezbollah has not been has not struck Israel where it hurts, so to speak. So now that Israel has gone so far as to assassinate the leader of Hezbollah, is the resistance likely to hit back in a way that hurts Israel?
Well, it has been hurting Israel throughout this 11 or so months. But yes, after the escalation, I would say that the resistance did not escalate as far as the Israeli regime did. But I think that will change, and we'll see in the coming weeks that the fighting will become very intense, and the Israeli regime will pay a significant price for this. Israel will not win. I have no doubt about that. These are painful times. Watching footage of children in Gaza, we've been seeing that for almost a year now. I wake up in the morning, one of the first things I see are clips of kids in Gaza being killed.
This is sad, bro.
I try to tweet them as often as I can just to remind people, not to depress them, but to remind people that this is ongoing. And now we see these horrific massacres taking place in Lebanon. As I said yesterday evening, the intensity of the strike was extraordinary. And on apartment blocks, apartment towers, full of women and children, like the child who is, you may be able to hear in the room next door, who have no comprehension of politics or anything, and just devastate all of them. I think a husband and wife, I'm pretty sure that a young husband and wife that I know were living in one of those apartment towers because they are no longer, the husband, who's a young friend of myself, is no longer responding to messages. So this is the reality that we're living in. We have to always remember that the resistance is facing a far more powerful enemy. The enemy is not Israel. Israel is just a colony, an evil colony. But this is the collective West that is doing everything possible to help this evil regime. But the resistance will prevail. The Israeli regime will not win. And once it is clear that it cannot win, I think that we'll be moving more rapidly towards the regime's demise. It may take time, but it will happen.
Nah, y'all got no time, man. You got no damn time,
You mentioned that Hezbollah is not necessarily popular with everyone in Lebanon. There are opponents to Hezbollah, resistance, etc. But how do you see the Lebanese street reacting to?
This is sad. Yeah, but this is sad. I can't hear no more. Oh my God, man. You know, he's just too fearful right now, y'all. I can't even. He about 10 more minutes left. I can't listen to the professor no more because he's not giving me straight, raw, uncut. He giving me pipe dreams, hope, wishes. You know, and like y'all said, all the fight knocked out of him, you know. And if Israel catch him slipping, they definitely gonna kill him too. He the professor, one of the top professors in Iran. They want him.
What's up, everyone? It's Danny Haifong here. I wanted to come on and just talk about briefly what just transpired in Lebanon, the political assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the longtime Hezbollah leader, who is a resistance hero all across the region, all across West Asia and the world. Israel conducted a massive airstrike in southern Lebanon on September 27th, dropping 2,000 tons of bombs and explosives via U.S. F-35s, U.S.-supplied F-35s, and Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated. Now, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation being spread. He was and he wasn't. But the fact is that now Hezbollah has acknowledged this. And I wanted to talk about the implications of this. Just wanted to show you, here is my dog. He is in attendance for this video to lighten the mood a bit. But I want to talk about the dark and the deep implications of this, the shocking implications of this, because what Israel just did was an egregious, just absolute insult and disrespect to international law. And of course, this is nothing new. Israel and the United States, as its primary backer, has been absolutely disrespecting international law since the very beginning of now this nearly 12-month military campaign that many have called a genocide in Gaza alone. But of course, this is extended to Lebanon in recent weeks to a huge degree, with the murder of over 1,000, nearly, I think, over 1,300 Lebanese people, many of them civilians, many of them children, in an attempt to achieve objectives that I don't believe Israel is actually going to achieve, returning the so-called settlers to the north, as well as destroying Hezbollah. And I'm going to talk about why I don't believe Hezbollah has been destroyed or will be destroyed by even this major blow. It is a major blow, but even this major blow will not destroy Hezbollah, and I'm going to explain why. But I want to talk about first how this occurred, not just the number of bombs, not just the U.S. supplied weapons that did it, but when it happened. Benjamin Netanyahu delayed his talks to the UN, his speech to the UN General Assembly. He delayed it. It was supposed to happen Wednesday, then it happened Friday the 27th when Nasrallah was killed. Now, media reports, Western media reports, Israeli media are saying that actually the reason why this occurred is because Israel was using the UN General Assembly as a diversion to make Hezbollah believe that there was no reason to be worried about any kind of Israeli strikes or major Israeli moves during this time. And Iran and many others now suspect that the U.S. and Benjamin Netanyahu were conspiring during the UN General Assembly to make this attack happen. So what does this mean? It means that the UN General Assembly was being used as essentially a military satellite base for war crimes, for literal war crimes, because we know that many civilians were killed in these attacks. So this is a major disrespect to the to the international system, to international law itself. But there's no surprise there. But the implications of this are going to be huge. There's going to be just a long war that mainstream media publications like the Foreign Affairs magazine have all been talking about. They've been talking about how Israel is trapped in a long war. As we speak, it is trapped in this multi-front war, a 7-front war, which includes Gaza, West Bank, it includes Ansarallah in Yemen, it includes Iran, it includes Hezbollah, and it includes the many resistance factions in Syria and Iraq, and that this 7-front war
is false. It is false that say Israel is trapped. No. Israel got the world shook, and Israel will kill everybody, and Israel is killing whoever they want, and they're not really facing no punishment for it, So, no, they're not trapped. That's not true. And Israel, unlike these rest of the enemies, if Israel back into the corner, they'll just kill everybody, They, whatever. The enemy's not ready to die. They're like, whatever y'all want to do. If they wouldn't be doing it if they wasn't ready to die. They don't believe. You see, they done read their enemies. They don't believe their enemies want to go all out. So they're just going to go ahead and finish them because they scared.
Actually has 8 fronts because Israel's internal political situation is deteriorating as we speak. But nonetheless, this assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah is a major blow to Hezbollah. We have to acknowledge that at the moment. But even today, even as I'm recording this video, Hezbollah continues its attacks into so-called Israeli territory. It continues to ensure that there is no respite for Israel and its attempts to so-called return the settlers to the north and essentially destroy Lebanon. And due to Lebanon, they're very open about this. Israel is very open about them wanting to do to Lebanon what they've done to Gaza. But it's my
They're doing it.
It's my estimation that this is actually not going to occur, that what we are actually witnessing is the death throes of the Israeli regime. And let me tell you why. Because no matter how beat back the resistance becomes, the resistance is going to exist. And not only is it going to exist, but the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah is likely going to expand the resistance. It's going to create many Hassan Nasrallahs. It's going to multiply the number of Hassan Nasrallahs that exist in the region. It's going to create an even more steadfast opposition in the region to what Israel is doing, and of course what the United States is doing. This was always a suicidal venture for both the United States and Israel, because the goals, right? The goals of a greater Israel that the regime has, the goals of creating wars to ensure that Netanyahu and his faction of the Israeli elite are secure, their political power is secure, was always a short-term venture. In the long term, what we are going to see is a continued deterioration of not just Israel's legitimacy, but Israel's influence, and then that will lead to Israel's eventual collapse. That is what we are seeing. The death of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, yes, in the short term, just like the pager attacks, just like these strikes on Lebanon, just like the death and the murder of so many commanders, that is going to have an immediate impact on Hezbollah and its ability to escalate operations. That is no doubt true, but it is not going to eliminate the resistance of Hezbollah. Actually, what it's going to do is it's going to cause Hezbollah to regroup and the entire resistance to regroup and to mount an even fiercer campaign of attack. But there's some difficult decisions that have to be made on the axis of resistance side. Firstly, we know that Iran has been talking for months about a response to Israel for its many transgressions against it, and especially the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the top Hamas negotiator. We know that there is still the Iranian response that has not come yet, but has caused Israel to, I believe, step up its mounting campaign, not just against Hezbollah, but to ensure that it is prepared for this potential attack from Iran. So it has been running scared in many respects. But Israel's not new to this. This is nothing new for Israel. Regional war is something that Israel has been planning as well for many, many, many years. And so Israel has stepped up its attacks on Hezbollah and has been able to mount some short-term successes against the resistance. But short-term successes against the resistance are really a blip on the overall radar and overall trajectory of this particular conflict. Because ever since October 7th, ever since Israel supposedly did not conduct the correct intelligence, did not expect what the Palestinian resistance did in Gaza, ever since that time, Israel has been engaged in a campaign that would lock itself into essentially the war to end all wars for Israel. Because before October 7th, Israel was relatively in a pretty good position. The Palestinian resistance had been, at that time, finding itself with the least support globally, at least support in the sense that would change the calculus. Of course, there are countries like Russia, Iran, China that all support Palestinian statehood. But other than Iran and Syria, there weren't many states actively supporting the Palestinian resistance in any kind of way, even in the realm of political support, even in the realm of making Palestine a big issue. After October 7th, we've seen a groundswell. We've seen an explosion of support for Palestine. We've seen also the fact that the axis of resistance has actually gotten stronger over this period. Even with these setbacks, we cannot say the axis of resistance is weaker than it was before October 7th. Indeed, we see Ansarallah, we see the Palestinian resistance groups in Gaza and in the West Bank. We see the resistance groups in Syria and Iraq. We see Hezbollah and we see Iran all more united than perhaps they've ever been prior. This is what the genocide has wrought. And so Israel right now is gambling that decapitating the head of the Hezbollah organization, decapitating its leader, just decapitating, create an existential crisis, an internal political crisis within the resistance as a whole. And this, in my opinion, is a miscalculation. Because if Israel indeed could defeat Hezbollah, if Israel indeed could defeat Iran, if Israel indeed could achieve its objectives, it would have already begun pursuing them. But no, it is locked into a years-long war, which will be heavily dependent upon the ability of the United States to support Israel at this level for as long as it can. It will depend on the world situation, increasing whether favorability or a lack of favorability toward Israel. And it will also depend on the ability of the resistance to be patient around this ongoing conflict. Because one of the reasons why the resistance has not taken a bigger step toward responding to Israel, one of the reasons why it hasn't shown its full capabilities, whether we're talking about Hezbollah, Iran, or really the entire axis in terms of coordinating a response and a retaliation to Israel, is because they don't want to see the bloodbath that's to come. That is the big problem here that the axis of resistance is really facing, is that Israel is willing, we've seen it in Gaza, Israel is more than willing to initiate a bloodbath in order to increase its standing, in order to ensure that its legitimacy is, even if it decreases. Sorry, I'm going to get my dog up here. I don't want him to lie on this dirt road. Even if the Israelis, the Israeli war machine, is more than willing to enact all of this violence, the axis of resistance actually is not. It does not want to see the Palestinian people be sacrificed at the altar of Israel's unhinged and the U.S.'s unhinged military policy. And you might ask, Danny, but Israel's already doing it. The United States is already doing it. They've already killed more than 40,000 Palestinians, at least in terms of the bombings and the military campaign that the U.S. and Israel has waged. But we know that it's been many more. We know that there's probably been 180,000+ Palestinians that have died by many other causes, not necessarily related to bombing, but or directly related to bombing, but in terms of the consequences of what this genocidal military campaign has wrought. And I would say, yes, you are right. But if we think about the actual strategic calculus in the region, what would happen if Iran, if Hezbollah indeed showed their full capabilities against Israel? It would mean that not only would Palestinians be sacrificed in massive, even more massive numbers. I mean, who knows if a Palestine would even exist after that? But Israel has the nuclear card. They do have the nuclear card, and I've covered this with Professor Saeed Mohammed Marandi on my program in our live show. I've covered the fact that Israel and Israeli media is talking about the nuclear Samson option. It's talking about how it can show off its nuclear capabilities to an even greater degree, how it can be more open about its nuclear capabilities to deter Iran, because it is more than well known. This is why Saeed Hassan Nasrallah was sacrificed. It's why Saeed Hassan Nasrallah was the target of assassination. It's why Israel has been going after Hezbollah leaders and Lebanese citizens, mind you. It's because it's to create fear, panic, anguish, and heartbreak. It's to demoralize the resistance, because Israel knows if the resistance is in a position where it has to fight Israel at full throttle, Israel will lose. Israel knows it will lose. Israel knows it cannot fight Lebanon. It cannot fight Hezbollah. It cannot fight Iran. It cannot fight the resistance as a whole, in totality, in any kind of military situation. It will either have to, one, spark a nuclear conflict, or it will have to, and in prelude to this, spark a massive regional war that would destroy Israel itself, too. So that is the ultimate strategic calculus that the Axis of Resistance is weighing here. It knows it cannot trust Israel to hold back, right? It cannot trust Israel to fight a conflict fairly, or to engage in the laws of war, or to, ensure that things don't spiral out of control. The Axis of Resistance has been the one that's had to manage escalation from the very beginning, and they are still doing that. I don't expect there to be massive, I expect there to be retaliation for Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah's murder, but I do not expect there to be a massive attack that will lead this into a regional conflict from the Axis of Resistance side. Indeed, we have Israel already doing this. So now the difficult decision is here for the Axis of Resistance. Are they going to be able to allow Israel to continue on this trajectory of mass death and destruction, of mass destabilization? The U.S., of course, sees this as a potential boon for them in terms of maintaining short-term strategic and geopolitical, economic, and military dominance in the region. In my opinion, that is a miscalculation, because actually the further and further Israel goes down this regional war rabbit hole, the more likely it is that U.S. power declines, as it already is in the region. That is the reality. This is kind of the unmistakable contradictions that we are seeing here, okay? And so, here's my dog again. There he is. And I just want to talk to you about what's been going on in the region, give you a brief update.
Strip in large numbers saw all kinds of. The Israeli destruction of Gaza is ongoing. People continue to die in that strip in large numbers, saw all kinds of civilian infrastructure. The little bit of that is left in Gaza continues to be bombed and destroyed, rendering Gaza uninhabitable to the 1.8 million people who are still left there, 1.7 million people, as the death toll is at least 45,000 or 50,000, with a lot of estimates, including from Lancet, placing it much, much higher. And that war has no end in sight. We're about to have the 1-year anniversary of October 7th, which is going to entail all sorts of propagandistic justifications that will ensure that that destruction and those civilian deaths continue at least the pace that they've been going, if not at a even more rapid pace. At the same time, Israel has opened up a second front in a war, this one in Lebanon, and they are now treating Beirut almost as if it's Gaza. They are dropping not just a number of bombs in residential areas, but they are dropping 2,000-pound bombs, the kind that they were using in Gaza, in densely packed areas. They're exploding and decimating entire residential buildings. And as always, they're excusing it by saying that the terrorists that they're trying to get at are hiding under it or hiding beneath it, and therefore it's justified. Here's a report from the Associated Press on the massive escalation in the bombing of Beirut today. Quote, Israel says it struck Hezbollah's headquarters in a huge explosion that shook Lebanon's capital. Quote, 3 major Israeli TV channels said Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah was the target of the strikes in Beirut's southern suburbs. The unsourced reports could not immediately be confirmed by the AP, and the army declined comment. But given the size and timing of the blast, there were strong indications that a senior leader may have been inside the building struck. Israeli Army spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said the strikes targeted the main Hezbollah headquarters located beneath residential buildings. 6 buildings in the Hart Creek neighborhood were reduced to rubble, according to Lebanon's national news agency. 6 residential buildings were reduced to rubble. The blast rattled windows and shook homes some 30 kilometers north of Beirut. Ambulances were seen heading to the scene, sirens wailing. Officials at a nearby hospital said they received at least 10 wounded, 3 critically, including a Syrian child. And that number has gone way, way up since those initial reports. Now, the estimate from the IDF is that at least 300 people have been killed in these blasts. The Lebanese government puts it at 700. If you look at the amount of destruction from these huge bombs that were dropped and the destruction that ensued, you won't have any doubt about the number of dead people being at least in the hundreds. And I would expect that to go higher. Obviously, when there's rubble, there's a lot of difficulty in figuring out how many bodies are buried beneath it. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu went to the United Nations and attempted to justify everything that Israel is doing by depicting everything Israel is doing in Israel itself as nothing more than an attempt to achieve peace in the region. Here's what Netanyahu said.
Ladies and gentlemen, Israel has made its choice. We seek to move forward to a bright age of prosperity and peace. Iran and its proxies have also made their choice. They want to move back to a dark age of terror and war. And now I have a question. And I pose that question to you. What choice will you make? Will your nation stand with Israel? Will you stand with democracy and peace? Or will you stand with Iran, a brutal dictatorship that subjugates its own people, exports terrorism across the globe? In this battle between good and evil, there must be no equivocation. When you stand with Israel, you stand for your own values and your own interests. Yes, we're defending ourselves, but we're also defending you against a common enemy that through violence and terror seeks to destroy our way of life.
Now, that sounds pretty much almost verbatim like the speech that George Bush gave on January 20th of 2001 to the joint session of Congress, speaking about the war on terror that he was about to launch. The problem for Netanyahu is that most of the world has already made their conclusions about what Israel is doing.
He don't give a damn.
The vast majority of the world is vehemently opposed to the Israeli devastation of Gaza.
Yeah,
they have enacted resolutions against it. They have filed war crimes proceedings against it outside of Western Europe and the United States. Much of the world sees it as an act of unjustified aggression, even a crime against humanity. So Benjamin Netanyahu is talking to a group of nations and governments that already have concluded that far from being the symbol of peace, Israel is the aggressor in that region, engaging in massive death of civilians and innocent people and children at enormous numbers, all in order to justify and continue their subjugation of the people of Palestine, of the West Bank and Gaza, which they intend to turn into Greater Israel, despite the fact that those borders are not recognized by any body in the world. In fact, those bodies say that the West Bank is illegally occupied and Gaza does not belong to Israel. Israel intends to ignore the world, to ignore those recognized boundaries. That is what this war is about, a war of expansion, a war of aggression, a war of conquest, to annex the West Bank and to annex Gaza and to cleanse it of Arabs and Palestinian people. And the war in Lebanon that Israel has now launched is going to be seen the same way because it's based on the same mentality, which is Israel has the right to extinguish the lives of as many civilians as they want every day, as long as they want, as long as they claim that nearby or underneath there was someone that they regard as a terrorist. Here is another part of Netanyahu's speech to the UN in which he describes, again, the mentality that has governed Gaza, which is that every civilian in Gaza is basically not an innocent civilian. They're responsible for what Hamas has done. And here's his view of, quote, every building or every apartment in Lebanon.
They fired those rockets and missiles after they placed them in schools, in hospitals, in apartment buildings, and in the private homes of the citizens of Lebanon.
Lies.
They endanger their own people. They put a missile in every kitchen, a rocket in every garage.
Lies.
I said to the people of Lebanon this week, get out of the death trap that Hezbollah has put you in. Don't let Nasrallah drag Lebanon into the abyss. We're not at war with you. We're at war with Hezbollah, which has hijacked your country and threatens to destroy ours.
BS.
We're not at war with you. We just consider the places that you live to be legitimate military targets because we regard your apartment building and your apartment itself as some sort of base of Hezbollah operations that we can destroy no matter how many of you we kill in order to get at one Hezbollah person. We can blow up wireless devices at supermarkets and at malls and kill children and innocent people in order to injure people that we regard as terrorists, which is what Israel has been doing over the past week. Now, one of the most bizarre, one of the strangest aspects of the U.S.-Israel dynamic is that Israel is treated in some sense like a puppet state. The U.S. funds its military. The U.S. provides it with all the weapons it needs and wants to destroy all these locations. The U.S. sacrifices its own standing in the world. It isolates itself at the UN to shield Israel diplomatically. Israel is completely dependent on the United States for all of its military actions, for all of these wars. So you would think the United States, as is true of most countries that finance other countries, as is true of most people who finance other people, would have the dominant voice in that relationship, and yet the exact opposite is true. The Biden administration knew that if this war in Gaza were ongoing into the election, it could really harm their chances to win and beat Donald Trump. They were doing everything possible to facilitate a ceasefire in Gaza, not only because of political reasons, but also because it radically subverts American interests. The world blames the United States equally with Israel for obviously valid reasons. And the more there's anti-Israel rage in the region and the world, there's more anti-American rage and violence in the world. And the more our troops in that area, our assets in that area, our interests around the world are jeopardized by continuing to support Israel. And yet the Israelis have made very clear they don't care what the United States says at all. They don't care what the United States wants at all. In fact, you may recall that midway through what is now the year-long war in Gaza, about 6 months ago, one of the few places where internally displaced Gazans could go in their refugee camp that had been at least reasonably safe was Rafah. And as a result of that, the Biden administration, upon hearing that Israel intended to start invading and bombing Rafah, said, we don't want you to do that. In fact, that's a red line for us, meaning that's the term used by presidents when they say this isn't just a desire, this is a command, this is a decree. This is something that if you ignore or do after we called it a red line, there will be consequences for it. Otherwise, what's the point of proclaiming red lines? And Netanyahu immediately mocked Biden for that red line. Said, we don't care what your red lines are. We're going to do whatever we think is in our interest. And they did invade and bomb and destroy Rafah and dispersed all of those people. And the United States did nothing but send billions and billions of dollars more in cash and weapons. And so now the United States has been doing everything possible, again, because they perceive it in their interest to try and prevent escalation with Hezbollah, in part because it brings a massive risk of escalation regionally that could end up sweeping in Iran. And the United States has already made clear, for whatever reasons, that the United States will involve ourselves in that war. We have major military assets deployed there, all of which will be endangered, but all of which will be utilized if this war, as looks increasingly likely, actually does turn into a major regional conflagration. And so the United States has been pressuring Israel in every way to pull back from this escalation, to have a ceasefire with Hezbollah. And Netanyahu is doing exactly the same thing as he did with Gaza, telling the United States, we don't give the slightest concern to what you want. From the Washington Post today, Netanyahu vows to continue Hezbollah war, defying a U.S. ceasefire plan. Quote, the Israeli leader speaking at the UN also issued a stark warning to Iran, saying his country's military could target its assets anywhere in the Middle East. Quote, his swaggering bellicose remarks included a warning to all of Israel's enemies, namely Iran, that there is no place to hide from Israel's might. Quote, if you strike us, we will strike you, Netanyahu said. There is no place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach, and that's true of the entire Middle East. Friday's speech at the United Nations is the latest in a series of remarks from the Israeli leader that have embarrassed U.S. officials, who earlier this week touted a, quote, breakthrough in negotiating a proposal for a 21-day truce that they insisted was done in full coordination with the Israeli government. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby was asked repeatedly Thursday why Netanyahu kept contradicting a proposal that the United States claimed had his support. But Kirby was unable to offer an answer other than to say that the prime minister's remarks were out of step with what his aides had told the U.S. officials privately. That is an embarrassment to the United States that they have been publicly announcing that they successfully facilitated a 21-day truce, only for Netanyahu to very publicly ignore that and violate it, and right in the face of the Americans. But embarrassment is what the United States has been suffering at the hands of what should be its client state of Israel for decades, for years, and certainly since October 7th, where the Israelis just make it increasingly clear that they don't, not only do they have indifference toward what the U.S. wants and says, they have contempt for it. And they also know that the U.S. will just continue, no matter how much the U.S. officials are, quote, embarrassed, to send Israel all the money and all the weapons it wants. In fact, the United States just announced on Tuesday that it was sending $8 billion more in weapons to Ukraine. And on Wednesday, it announced the approval of an $8.5 billion package of arms to Israel. So this embarrassment never has any consequences. If anything, the more the Israelis humiliate the United States, the more the United States gives to Israel. Now, it is true that the war in Gaza is getting increasingly less or smaller and smaller amounts of attention, in part because it's been going on for a year, but obviously this new war is going to get a lot of attention, even though the destruction in Gaza has not lessened at all. From the New York Times on September 24th, this was earlier this week, quote, families of hostages and Gazans feel forgotten as the war heats up in Lebanon. Quote, talks to reach a potential ceasefire in Gaza and free the remaining 100 or so hostages have stalled. After nearly a year, roughly 100 of the more than 250 hostages held by Hamas remain in the clutches of Palestinian militants in Gaza. They include women and older people kidnapped from their homes, as well as soldiers abducted from military bases. With all eyes on Israel's escalating battle with Hezbollah in Lebanon, many families now fear any hopes to save the hostages are rapidly vanishing, said Itzhak Horn, whose sons Eitan, 38, and Yair, 46, are still held. Quote, we've been abandoned again and again by the Israeli government, he said. And quote, now the resources and attention are heading to the north. Both Eitan and Yair were abducted from near Oz, a border village that was devastated by the Hamas-led attack. Many of its roughly 400 members were either killed or kidnapped by Palestinian militants. Noam Dan, who was also abducted there, accused Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, of, quote, cruelly neglecting the remaining hostages in favor of the escalations. Mr. Calderon's children, Sahar and Erez, were released in the week-long truce with Hamas in November. Mr. Netanyahu had said that he is committed to securing the release of the remaining hostages, but he has repeatedly said he will not agree to a ceasefire with Hamas that compromises on what he called Israel's fundamental security needs. Like many close to remaining captives, Ms. Dan said she believed Mr. Netanyahu was more worried about the future of his government than securing the release of the hostages. Some of his coalition partners have opposed recent ceasefire proposals. Quote, there's no momentum, no negotiations, not even a bit of anything. Everyone's now busy with the war in the north, Mr. Horn said. Recall that from the beginning of the Israeli destruction of Gaza, the rationale, the justification was, in large part, we have to get our hostages back, which never made any sense. Why would a strategy for protecting hostages in Gaza be to bomb Gaza indiscriminately? And there were far more Israeli hostages in Gaza killed by Israeli bombardments than Israel was able to rescue. And Israelis who were kidnapped and held hostage in Gaza, when they were released and returned, said that the thing they feared most was not getting killed by Hamas, but was getting killed by Israeli bombardment. Netanyahu has never cared about the hostages at all, not at all. And it's the families who see that. There are people in Israel in hundreds of thousands of numbers going out into the street to protest that fact. What he cares about is his own political future, his concern that his government will fall apart unless he continues to go all out with war with all of Israel's neighbors, and the fact that he faces a serious corruption trial, which he will have to face the minute he leaves the presidency. He's killed a lot of hostages. He's done almost nothing to secure their release. And that's what their families are in large numbers saying. Here from the UN News today on the Lebanon crisis, quote, this is just the beginning, say those impacted by deadly escalation. Quote, we are witnessing the deadliest period in Lebanon in a generation, and many express their fear that this is just the beginning, said Imran Riza, the UN's top aid official in Lebanon. Quote, the UN and its partners are closely coordinating with the Lebanese government to support the response efforts. This includes aligning and distribution, conducting joint assessments, and identifying urgent needs for affected populations. Speaking from Beirut, Mr. Riza, the UN humanitarian coordinator in Lebanon, said that for nearly a year, the country's people, and especially those in the south, had, quote, lived in fear that the war in Gaza could come to them. Today, across Lebanon, thousands of people in rural communities previously unaffected by Israeli targeting of Hezbollah infrastructure have fled bombardment and widespread destruction that have claimed at least 700 lives, injured thousands, and uprooted around 12,000 people, quote, within mere hours, he said. Now, obviously, there's an enormous amount of hatred and rage and a desire for violent retribution against Israel for self-evident reasons.
They better fight back.
But every time that also spills over to the United States, to the government, to our military, to the soldiers deployed there, to our interests all over the world. From the Times of Israel earlier today, quote, security source says Lebanese army is putting up a protective cordon around the U.S. embassy. Quote, the Lebanese army is protectively setting up a security cordon around the U.S. embassy in Lebanon, which is north of Beirut, a security source tells Reuters. And at first glance, it may seem confusing. Why would the U.S. embassy in Beirut need fortifying when it's the Israelis dropping the bomb? But of course, everyone in Lebanon, everyone around the world, except in America, understands that this is as much of an American war as it is an Israeli war. For many, many years now, people, even within the national security community, have been warning that our continuous, unflinching, unlimited support of Israel in every one of their wars and conflicts with their Arab neighbors is highly detrimental to American interests. They often have to apologize after they speak that truth, because that's one of the taboo truths that is not permitted to be heard in the United States. But frequently they have said it, including David Petraeus, the general who led the counterinsurgency in Afghanistan and then ran the CIA for President Obama. In 2010, the Jerusalem Post reported, quote, Arab-Israeli conflict hurts the United States. General Petraeus tells Congress that hostility presents challenges to U.S. interests in the Middle East. Quote, U.S. General David Petraeus charged Thursday that the Arab-Israeli conflict hurts America's ability to advance its interests in the Middle East, fomenting anti-American sentiment and limiting American strategic partnerships with Arab governments. Petraeus called the conflict one of the, quote, root causes of instability and obstacles to security in the region, which aids al-Qaeda, and argued that serious progress in the peace process could weaken Iran's reach as it uses the conflict to fuel support for its terror proxies. Quote, the enduring hostilities between Israel and some of its neighbors present distinct challenges to our ability to advance our interests, he said. In the written testimony, quote, Arab anger over the Palestinian question limits the strength and depth of U.S. partnerships with governments and peoples in the Middle East and weakens the legitimacy of moderate regimes in the Arab world. This is just blatantly and obviously true. That, moral questions aside, just on a strategic basis, our decision to elevate Israel and its military in wars to at least a level of priority equal to our own wars and military, if not at a higher level. There's a lot more criticism of American wars in the United States than there is of Israel wars. A lot more opposition to American military spending in the United States than there is for American military spending for Israel's military and wars. But it's not just a moral question, it's that strategically the United States ends up being hated by huge parts of the world that impede its interests because of how closely it stands by Israel, how much money and the weapons, when the bombs fall, people understand those are American weapons that were provided for that reason. Now, one of the ironies of Israel constantly claiming that it's Hezbollah and Hamas that purposely build their military targets and installations in civilian areas is that Israel has done that for decades. Exactly that. The New York Times in May of 2021 published an article, quote, a look inside Israel's, quote, Fortress of Zion military command beneath Tel Aviv. The country's military and intelligence commanded the recent assault of Hamas in Gaza from an underground bunker made for high-tech wars. So they are building, the Israelis are, their command and control centers, their military targets underneath civilian infrastructure in Tel Aviv. You think that if Hezbollah or Iran shot missiles and blew up residential apartment buildings in Tel Aviv, anyone in the West would dare suggest that if it killed hundreds of Israeli civilians, that was justified because there were military targets, legitimate military targets underneath that the Israelis purposely constructed under civilian infrastructure deep in the ground of Tel Aviv? Here's a Google map that shows where that military base is, that is in Tel Aviv, that under which the Fortress of Zion sits. And in this map, you can see that that red dot there, which if we could pull up these pens so we can just emphasize them, this red dot here is the military base, and many of these other very nearby infrastructure and buildings are civilian buildings. They're shopping malls, they're residential centers, museums, art galleries, right in the middle of Tel Aviv. And the Israelis built this principal military command and control base, the Fortress of Zion, as the New York Times called it, right underneath that structure. So the only way that you can get at it is by dropping massive bombs that will blow up all the civilian infrastructure and the people inside of it as well. What possible ground would anyone have to object to someone doing that if they're defending the Israeli bombing of schools and residential buildings in Beirut and in Gaza? And as I said earlier, if you want to apply it to the United States to make it a little closer to home, if you were Iraq or if you were Afghanistan or you were Yemen or Syria or Libya, any of the countries that the United States has been bombing and killing civilians in with drones and airstrikes over the last 15 years, you were able to identify a military commander who designed those attacks that killed your civilians and found out where he lived inside the United States, and it turned out he lived in some high-rise apartment building in a major American city, which is probably likely since those types of people, once they leave the military, generally making a massive amount of money, serving as consultants for the military-industrial complex, telling Raytheon and General Dynamics how to get massive contracts from the Pentagon, in which they once worked. By this moral framework, any of those countries that we bomb would be justified, or any of these countries that we bomb in the future would be justified in just blowing up the entire 84 high-rise of apartment buildings filled with civilians. And their argument would be, oh, the military commander was in it and we wanted to get him. And the only way we could get him, because he lives among civilians, was by blowing up this building. That's exactly the moral and legal mentality and framework the Israelis are using to justify everything they're doing in Beirut and everything they've been doing in Gaza over the past year. Is that an acceptable framework when applied reciprocally to the United States or to Israel? Just to ask that question is to answer it. Now, just to give you a sense of the magnitude of the destruction, there have been videos taken by people in Beirut that have been verified by outlets such as the Associated Press, and the Associated Press published several of those videos just to give you a sense for how massive these bombs were that were dropped in the middle of residential areas in Beirut earlier today. So, as I said, they flattened at least. We don't need to play that on a loop. The bombs that they dropped were huge bombs in a densely packed residential area that flattened at least 6 apartment buildings. And as usual, the Israelis used the justification that they always had. There's reports or speculation. Oh, I think we have actually more here. It wasn't actually on a loop. Let's just finish playing that just to get a sense of the magnitude. You'll see it from different angles. You'll see how many apartment buildings were exploded. You'll see how close they are to all sorts of residential facilities, the massive smoke clouds that are in the air hovering over Beirut. Obviously, that's designed to be, and of course, is terrorizing. You can hear human screaming coming from those places where there's bombing. You can hear that in that part. So that's what the country that Benjamin Netanyahu said represents peace and tranquility and stability in the world is doing now to the city of Beirut. Now, as I was saying, the alleged target of these airstrikes was the quote-unquote Hezbollah headquarters, and specifically Hassan Nasrallah, who has been the longtime and very clever leader of Hezbollah. There's some speculation that he might have been there and had been killed. There's other speculation that he was not there. None of that is yet confirmed. But either way, the question continues to be whether there are any limits on what Israel can do. Can they just destroy all of Beirut, kill hundreds of thousands of people, and then just say, well, we had to get rid of Hezbollah and they're integrated into the civilian infrastructure in Beirut? And if that is a moral argument that works for Israel, that justifies Israel killing huge numbers of civilians as they did in Gaza, then by definition, that would have to be a justifying framework that other countries can use against, say, Israel, the United States, or its allies as well. And I think we need to be very careful about what it is that we're endorsing, but also questioning why it is that the United States continues to deliberately sacrifice its own interests, even to the point where it's being deliberately and flagrantly humiliated by Israel in order to stand by Israel, in order to continue to finance its military, in order to continue to give it the bombs that it uses to blow up huge numbers of civilian people. And then if there's an attack on the United States again, like there was on 9/11, we'll all get to run around and say, oh my God, why does anyone hate us? Why would anyone attack us? Why would anyone want to kill us? And we'll hear, oh, they hate us for our freedoms. They hate us for that. And any rational person looking at that would feel the same way.
Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, but we challenge. And if this is our Destroy Media Narratives, I'm George Samueli. And I just want to do a short podcast now on the dramatic events of the past 24 hours, namely the Israeli assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. As you know, this was a massive bombing attack in Beirut. Israel clearly used massive bunker buster bombs that it got from the United States. Israel has obviously been targeting Nasrallah for some time. And this assassination comes on top of a series of assassinations that Israel has carried out in Lebanon, starting all the way back in July when it murdered a top Hezbollah commander, Fuad Shakur. We also know, of course, the killing of the Haniya, the sort of Hamas leader in Tehran, and then, of course, we had very recently the pager attack, followed by the walkie-talkie attack, and then followed by a series of assassinations of top Hezbollah commanders. So, as things stand, Hezbollah is in disarray. It's they obviously, all of their top commanders have been wiped out, and they have to be really at their most vulnerable right now. Obviously, I mean, these are very early days. It was just a few hours after it's happened, but we can draw a few conclusions. Clearly, Hezbollah's extraordinary passivity and lack of response to Israel's escalated assassinations. They didn't respond to the July assassination of Fuad Shakur. They didn't really respond to the pager attacks and the walkie-talkie attacks. Didn't respond to the killing of the top commanders earlier in the week. Along with Iran's passivity over the murder of Hamas leader Haniya a little while ago, has only encouraged Israel to go further and further, and now they basically did the biggest prize of all, namely the killing of Nasrallah, who has been the public face of Hezbollah now for decades. I mean, he has a huge reputation, a huge following in the Middle East, and now he was obviously thought to be invulnerable precisely on account of his public standing. But Israel showed, nope, we're going to take him out. Now, so that's obviously one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that clearly Hezbollah had been thoroughly infiltrated, absolutely infiltrated through and through by Israel. So all of the stories about Hezbollah's extraordinary secrecy and security, and nobody can get through to them. It's like one like going through a castle, and there's one moat after another. You can't possibly get through to Hezbollah. Well, Israel did it, and did it very quickly.
Right.
The shocking thing is that even in light of what happened with the pager attacks, when it was clear what Israel was doing, Israel was clearly targeting Hezbollah leaders. Hezbollah seemed to make no real attempt to beef up its security, and made no attempt to move out, get away from any place in danger, since they knew that Israel was clearly tracking them. So you have to think, why would Nasrallah be such a sitting duck for Israel? So that's another thing. I mean, again, why this extraordinary passivity? I mean, Hezbollah launched this kind of mini war against Israel in support of Hamas fighting against Israel in Gaza. It was not much of a war, but it was something. It was more than anyone else was doing, but it was very minor. And Nasrallah made clear that he intended to keep it very low key. But the problem was that Israel didn't intend to keep it low key. Israel seized on this this Hezbollah attacks as an opportunity to get even with the organization. So that plan of maintaining a low-key war, okay, well, we were not going to escalate. We don't really want a full-scale war with Israel. Well, that plan has failed. So it's
only going to continue to fail if they keep it up. Israel got the green light to whack them all and finish them off. They're going to kill the supreme leader of Iran, Khomeini. Iran better be building a nuclear bomb right now as we speak. They better be doing that. They better be doing that because it's coming.
Hezbollah chose to fight low key. Israel decided to escalate and decided to wipe out the Hezbollah leadership. With Hezbollah in such disarray, you'd have to think that this would certainly be an opportunity for Israel to launch an invasion of Lebanon and seize southern Lebanon and use that as essentially as a buffer zone, occupy it, and essentially that would provide Israel with the security for its northern border. Before we'd been wary of predicting that Israel would do this because of Hezbollah, the ferocious resistance that Israel would likely meet, and therefore Israel was unlikely to do it. But now with Hezbollah leadership in disarray, this would obviously be the opportune time to launch an invasion. Maybe move up to the Litani River, and that's it. And that there it becomes just Israeli occupied territory, and that will provide security for the Israel's northern villages. So I think that could well happen. The other thing is, how will Iran respond to this? Because, of course, Hezbollah is a key ingredient of Iran's great power projection, or at least, great power by Middle East standards projection. With Hezbollah gone, Iran really doesn't have too much going for it. I mean, there are obviously the various fighters in Iraq. There's obviously the Houthis, but they're nothing like as formidable as Hezbollah was, and so that Iran is now much diminished, and indeed, Iran now becomes very much vulnerable because Iran now would be in Israel's crosshairs, and Israel is now riding high. It's done what nobody thought that it would do, which is to take out Hezbollah's leaders, take out the great Nasrallah, and so why not provoke a war in Tehran? We know that Israel is quite capable of conducting assassinations in Iran. It did that with the Hamas leader Haniyeh a little while ago. So Israel again absolutely prepared to carry out assassinations within Iran and provoke a war with Iran. Now, you would have to then say that if Iran intends to remain a player in the region, then it's going to have to respond to Israel. It can't just play the same game that it had been playing up until now. The Hezbollah has been playing this very minor
truth to the people
resistance. It's not working. It's clear that Israel is playing for keeps. Israel is being very serious. So Iran's going to have to do something, because otherwise Israel is going to pick it off. I mean, in no time at all, Israel is going to do, either terrorist incidents within Tehran or just simply carry out assassinations of Iran's leaders, obviously with a view to provoking a war with Iran, in which case the United States gets involved, and that's obviously what Israel wants to see done. So that's, I think, something that's on the cards. I don't think Iran can just simply sit around waiting in the way it's being done, because if you wait, Israel's going to come after you. So that's that aspect. The other aspect is, of course, what about Hezbollah's vaunted missile armory? We've been hearing about how Iran, Hezbollah has something like 100,000 missiles. It could just launch them against Israel, overwhelm Israel's Iron Dome system, and later waste Israel. Well, to be honest, I'm not buying it. We haven't seen any evidence of it, and I'll believe it when I see it. So I suspect it's like everything else about Hezbollah. There's been a lot of exaggeration, a lot of wishful thinking on the part of the alternative media, who have been selling us a bill of goods for a long time. And I think what has happened in the past few weeks, essentially puts to rest a lot of these wild exaggerations about Hezbollah's prowess and about Iran's great power emergence. None of that has happened.
No, they got.
But I think we're going to see,
they scared of,
in the next few days,
that's
what happens next. But what should I say is the most foolish looking people of all are the Americans, because remember, this is what Netanyahu did at the time when the Americans were claiming that there was some serious ceasefire negotiations going on. Imagine saying all this, that there were these ceasefire negotiations while Israel was planning this massive attack on the Hezbollah leaders, in much the same way as they were going on and on about these ceasefire negotiations with Hamas, and then Israel then took out the political leader of Hamas while he was in Tehran. So again, the Biden administration looks absolutely ridiculous, and the way they continue to go on, particularly Kamala Harris, we've got to get a deal done. We've got to get a deal done. We've got a deal. We're on the brink of a deal. You're not on the brink of anything. And clearly, Israel has no intention of stopping or coming to any kind of an agreement or anything. So that's out. But just to say that we'll see in the next few days whether Hezbollah really has anything up its sleeve, when it has the missiles in order to force Israel to pay a price for what it's done. Because remember, Hezbollah's huge reputation has come about through this universal belief that they have this massive armory of missiles that they can just unleash on Israel. So huge would this attack be that Israel's vaunted Iron Dome system would be overwhelmed, and Hezbollah would be able to sort of pretty much wipe Israel off the map. Well, we'll see. How much, if any, of it is true. I don't think they, whatever is left of Hezbollah, I don't think they can wait around and see what Israel's going to do next, because we know what Israel's going to do next. Whoever is still living will be targeted next. And so we'll see whether the axis of resistance, it has any real basis to it at all. We'll see what Iran does. We'll see what the remnants of Hezbollah will do. But you'd have to say that however much we all dislike Israel and what it's doing, how it comports itself in the world, you'd have to admit that this was a bold coup. It wasn't what anyone was expecting.
In fact, man, Israel
all the talk
right now
had been, and some of the people who had come on, the gaggle was that Israel would launch an invasion. Israel was launching an invasion. I was always skeptical of that, because I didn't think that they would want to have two ground wars at the same time. I think Israel must be exhausted from the fight against Hamas, which has now been going on for a year. And then, on top of that, they'd have this terrible war in Lebanon. I just didn't think it was likely. What I didn't expect was how the tactics that Israel used, which was to decapitate Hezbollah. This was obviously a very carefully planned operation. This is obviously has been in the works for months, and we'll see whether it accomplishes anything. I mean, Israel's long-term project is still very, very dubious. I mean, you can't survive ultimately when everyone in your neighborhood hates you. So it's not a long-term viable project. But in the meantime, Israel can wreak havoc. So if the worst comes to the worst and there's war with Iran, then we could have a very serious fight on our hands, because I think America would get involved in a war between Israel and Iran. And that's so, which itself is quite extraordinary that the Americans, I don't think they knew that this was coming. This assassination of Nasrallah was coming. But again, as always, the Americans will have to live with the consequences, and ordinary Americans who may find themselves the victims of terrorist attacks will have to live with these consequences. Anyway, just a short update. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of more developments over the weekend. We'll see what happens, and we'll obviously update if need be, and then we'll do our usual podcast on Sunday. Anyway, thank you.
وأن الله لا يضيع أجر المؤمنين.
I guess just give me a second.
إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.
Okay, I'll start.
ولا حول ولا قوة
We are from God
إلا
Almighty,
بالله
and to Him
العلي
we shall
العظيم.
return. And there is no strength and power except from God. God is the only potent power in the world with all.
My boy Brave, man. My boy Brave, man, the leader of the Houthi rebels. He's coming out making his statement, man. They want him dead too. But he coming out like a revolutionary, letting Israel know they got to kill him too, and they absolutely got him on their list. But it's very brave of him to come out, and I'm pretty sure he's preparing his fighters to fight a good fight. The Yemeni are soldiers.
Feelings of sadness and tragedy, we hereby declare the great leader, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. May God bless his soul. We give our condolences, our deepest feelings of condolences to his dear family and our brothers and sisters in Hezbollah and its people, and all those who are in the battlefield and belong to resistance all across the areas and all the fronts of support, the Palestinian people and their dear fighters, and all the Muslims and the Muslim people. God has added to your blessings and your deeds, and that this is a tragedy and a loss for all the resistance factions and the resistance force. May God also give him greatness, and we bless him. We congratulate him on this conclusion and this sacrifice, and how he sacrificed his life, the greatest path of struggle in the name of God Almighty. He sought and put all efforts and his life and his years of youth and his capabilities and his efforts and strength for God and in the name of God as a bright star on the path of the fighters and freedom fighters, and a great leader that held the banner of Islam and jihad. And he was a personification of all the values of Islam. And he was a dignified figure that was patient and steadfast and faithful and advising and honest and wise, and was someone who was secure, the friend, and even those who hated him knew him as such. And God realized on his hands and with his efforts and with his work with the brothers in Hezbollah, the great achievements and great victories and the transformations to the extent of great glorious phases. And in facing this great sacrifice in the name of God Almighty, this is the path of only being patient. And with sadness, there is rage and anger at the enemies of Islam and the enemies of humanity, the murderous Zionists and the people who are patient, our dear brothers and sisters in Hezbollah and the supporters of the resistance, who understand and are well aware that the path of struggle in the name of God Almighty is also the path of martyrdom, and that the sacrifices in the name of God are only one part of jihad itself and struggle itself. It is a great deed and giving, as it is also a martyrdom and a struggle against oppression. God, Hezbollah, with its leadership and its commanders and its fighters and its members and its supporters, have held that spirit of faith of Imam Hussein on the path of struggle and holy war and jihad, and they were able to face all the challenges and difficulties and all the difficult phases. And what happened today was on the path of those who are in the divine path that God Almighty has called in His Holy Quran. as those are prophets with those with him who fight alongside him, and they are not weakened by what they suffer, and they would not weaken or be in despair. God loves those who are patient, and God's words also say that they only ask God Almighty to forgive their sins and to make them steadfast and to give them victory over the infidels. And God Almighty gave them the deeds of this life and the fruit of the afterlife. And God loves the good doers. And this is the path, this is the stance, a condition of patience and determination and trust in God Almighty, that these great sacrifices and this great oppression will not be in vain, and that God Almighty will accept this sacrifice, and He will, through this sacrifice, write and destine for the sake of the patient and sacrificing people and worshippers a victory. And what the most significant thing that we need to look at in this very sensitive phase is to work on defeating all the objectives and the attempts of the Israeli military to, as they try to use this to break the front of Hezbollah, which is a front, which is a pioneer front. It is a very strong front in facing the Zionist enemy from the first day of its establishment, the establishment of Hezbollah, and since the founding and the onset of Hezbollah. And that therefore the loyalty to the martyr of Islam, the martyr of humanity, His Eminence, the Secretary General of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, may God bless his soul, is to continue on the same path with more determination and will and more trust and confidence in God Almighty and dependence on God Almighty. And as the enemies had always in the past, the Zionist enemies had been in despair after killing the martyr and great fighter Ismail Haniyeh, may God bless his soul, they will also be in despair, and their objectives will not be realized, and they will be defeated in this great murder and this brutal murder of their assassination of the great martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, God bless his soul, concerning the path of resistance, path of jihad and support front, the path of the front of Palestine, no matter what the sacrifices, no matter what the extent of the sacrifices are, the Zionist enemy imagines that perhaps they were able, through their arms and their many armaments, that they can be able to break the resistance and achieve some achievements or some sort of a victory because of their hatred and their complex of vengeance and their attempts to only to take revenge. This is what happened when they targeted the martyr Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi as well. God bless his soul. And this was what their attempts were as they targeted the top commanders like Sheikh Raghab Harb and the leaders like Sheikh Raghab Harb and Imad Duqni and other commanders as well. And this is what they attempted on the Palestinian front when they committed the murder of killing the martyr Ahmad Yassin and several other leaders of the resistance like Aziz al-Rantisi and other leaders, God bless their soul. And also they attempted this when they committed the murder of the great fighter Ismail Haniyeh, God bless his soul. And did they realize their objectives that they were hoping for? Do we see that the fronts were open to them? Were the fighters surrender? But we noticed, on the contrary, the fighters were even more determined and even more steadfast, and they held the banner and they continued that path. And God Almighty was able to realize on their hands one achievement and one victory after the other. The Zionist enemy continues to commit its very heinous crimes of killing the leaders and others, but they will not realize their hopes and their dreams and the results that they dream of. And the end of this, the demise of this regime is fateful. God Almighty knows, but many do not know. And on in this platform, I stress that we are with our brothers in Hezbollah, and that the fronts of support, and the banner of Islam and the banner of holy struggle will continue to be raised high, despite the arrogance of the Israeli and Zionist enemy, despite we're not going to go into details of denouncing this stance. We're only going to be working on action, and we will speak more in detail about this later. And also, I want to stress that the people and the public understand the battle is ongoing, and the Zionist enemy needs to understand that the support front can continue, and that the Israeli enemy is a threat to all of humanity. We will not be traitors and forsake the blood of the two great martyrs. And I hope from the media also to be very active in this last phase, and the fighters in it to take more action to stop all campaigns, all the satanic campaigns to try to break the will of the people. And this is being done by the Zionist enemy and its collaborators. And once more, I stress to our martyrs, to our martyr and all the past martyrs in Lebanon and Palestine, that we are steadfast, that we are patient, and we have confidence in God Almighty, and your blood will not be in vain. And God is a witness to our words, and it is God who is our backer, and He is our supporter, and we are from God, and we will return, and to God we shall return, and there is no power and strength except in God Almighty. Peace be upon you.
By the Israeli state, obviously in Lebanon, the mass slaughter of literally countless Lebanese civilians. We have absolutely no idea how many have been just kept murdered, slaughtered in the latest violence unleashed by the Israeli state in Beirut, but also elsewhere. That's obviously on top of the vast numbers of Palestinians who've been butchered now for what is almost exactly a year since this genocidal onslaught began. The focus is, of course, on the killing of Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. What we're going to talk about today, we've got the best possible person to speak to about this, Muin Rabini. Many of you will know, we chatted, me and Muin, I think back in early this year. Yeah. A lot has happened since. The brilliant co-editor of Jadaliyya, a Middle East analyst, a Palestinian Dutch analyst, and one of the best analysts you'll find. I know many journalists who actually want an informed take on this will, whenever something happens, go straight to check out Muin's brilliant Twitter threads often, which go into great detail about the latest developments. How are you doing in these difficult times, firstly? Great to see you.
And it's good to be with you, and thanks for inviting me.
I just want to start actually with what isn't being focused on at the moment in the headlines of the BBC, various Western newspapers, and that is the countless deaths, the killings, sorry, they didn't just die and fall over, did they? Of the dropping of bombs on entire apartment blocks full of huge numbers of Lebanese civilians. And just your thoughts on that and the way that's being discussed or not discussed, portrayed in the analysis that we can see of the latest developments.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very pertinent question. According to Israeli reports, 85 tons of high explosives were dropped within the space of seconds on Beirut yesterday, the Lebanese capital, on one city block, essentially in order to assassinate one man and those who were with him. And in the 24 hours since, there were, I believe, between 30 and 50 additional massive air raids on Beirut, the southern suburbs, not even taking into account further massive air raids on Tyre, on the Bekaa Valley, on other areas of Lebanon. I don't have the exact figures, but it's probably a safe assumption that in the past 24 hours, Israel has dropped more high explosives on Beirut than it did during the entirety of the 1982 invasion of Lebanon, or arguably even the 2006 assault on Lebanon. Now, what's interesting in the coverage of this, of course, is that Hezbollah is held responsible for having its central command headquarters in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. And this is then used as a pretext to claim that Hezbollah is using the civilian population as human shields, and therefore bears responsibility for the massive casualty toll that was produced yesterday. I think something like 6 or 7 apartment buildings containing dozens of homes were leveled to the ground. Well, yes, Hezbollah has established its headquarters in Beirut. But my response to that would be, is there really any instance in history where a movement or a state within the state, or however you want to describe it, establishes its headquarters on an isolated hilltop away from its core constituency or the center of its political weight? I mean, you know, is Israel's Ministry of Defense in the heart of Tel Aviv or in Cyprus? Is Britain's Ministry of Defense and its entire security headquarters, is it based in London or on some field with nothing but sheep in Wales? I mean, this is, you know, this is how militaries have behaved historically. And to then twist this around and saying, well, they're deliberately placing it in the heart of civilian areas in order to use a civilian population as human shield is a bit rich. There are compelling reasons why every military organization places its headquarters at the center, let's say, of its political structure.
I mean, the IDF's headquarters in Tel Aviv surrounded people, note, by shopping malls and apartment blocks.
Yes, and if I may interrupt, I would argue again here, you know, whether it's the Israelis or Hezbollah or Hamas in Gaza or, you know, any other state around the globe, this isn't a deliberate strategy to use the civilian population as human shields. This is how states and organizations operate. You know, they have nerve centers, they have capital cities. They place their most important institutions within those geographical areas. It's almost a law of nature.
In 1982, you mentioned the Israeli invasion back in 1982, and back then the right-wing Republican President Ronald Reagan got on the phone to the then Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin to protest against what he called a Holocaust and demanded the cessation of those attacks, which actually, I mean, obviously Israel continued to commit terrible atrocities in Lebanon, but in that particular instance, they called off those specific attacks. You also got the massacre of Shabba Shatila, and up to 3,500 Lebanese and Palestinians were butchered in some of the most heinous imaginable violence, depravity, which Ariel Sharon, the defense minister, was later found culpable of. It was committed by Israel's allies, of course, by an Israeli commission. Huge numbers of Israelis at the time took to the streets. I suppose what I'm talking about is it's just this degradation of the worth of Arab life. I mean, we have a Democratic president, Joe Biden. I mean, somehow he's barely functioning, but I mean, in the here and now, if you compare to 1982, we're seeing actually worse violence, worse atrocities, more mass slaughter. And yet the way that's portrayed in the media and the response of our political leaders, well, there's quite a contrast, actually, I would say.
Yes, and it's an interesting anecdote for more than one reason. As you mentioned, in 1982, the U.S. president at the time, Ronald Reagan, called Menachem Begin, the Israeli prime minister, and protested about after seeing, according to the conventional narration of this incident, after seeing pictures of dismembered, badly burned Palestinian children in Beirut, he called Begin and told him this Holocaust has to end now. Begin, of course, vociferously protested, we're the only victims here, and so on. But then within 24 hours, the bombing stopped. But this was not the result of Reagan suddenly discovering a conscience upon seeing all those images of Palestinian civilian victims of Israel's terror bombing. What actually happened is that the Saudi crown prince at the time, Prince Fahd, called Reagan and basically told him that the Arab states were coming under increasing pressure because of their alliance with the United States and needed to see some form of intervention by Washington. And it was in that context that Reagan felt he had to act. And of course, the important difference between 1982 and 2023, 2024 is the complete absence of the Arab states. They have played the role of impotent spectators. They have not even withdrawn ambassadors. Those who have diplomatic relations with Israel have not reconsidered their ties with Israel's extreme right-wing government and so on. And so I think, when you want to compare then and now, we have to look not only at what Washington did, but also why it acted. And that, I think, is an important distinction. Your second point, I think, is entirely correct. We were just talking about the terror bombing of Beirut yesterday, which comes on top of a year of genocidal violence, a genocidal campaign by Israel in the Gaza Strip, and levels of violence against the population of the West Bank that we haven't seen since the Second Intifada. And I think the important point here is that it has been completely normalized. We wake up to this day in and day out for an entire year now. And, you look at Western leaders, Western media, and so on, and it's all placed within the framework of Israel defending itself, Israel's right to defend itself. So there may be an excess here or there, but ultimately it's all legitimate and justified because it is taking place not within the framework of Israel being a supremacist apartheid state that is engaging in genocide and aggression in order to consolidate its permanent control over those under its subjugation, but rather it is Israel being illegitimately attacked for irrational reasons by radical terrorists and therefore engaging in a legitimate campaign of self-defense.
Let's just talk about the significance of the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, who was, of course, the Secretary General of Hezbollah and has been since 1992, when his predecessor, Abbas al-Musawi, was killed, assassinated by the Israeli state. I think in that question with those details kind of helps answer the question, really, doesn't it? But I think, what is the significance of, this is undoubtedly, on top of the pager attacks, which should be rightly seen as a form of terrorism themselves, clearly a big blow to Hezbollah. But how significant is it in the longer term? How much does it change the dynamics? What are your thoughts?
It's a massive blow, and I think, even though I think it would be fair to say that Nasrallah always expected to die this way, that it has happened, and it's happened at this particular historical juncture is extraordinarily significant. And again, this is not, as you suggested, this is not an assassination that has taken place in isolation from what we've seen in the past month. I mean, since late July until now, late September, Israel has effectively decapitated Hezbollah, has managed to assassinate most of its most senior military and political leaders. It has essentially quite successfully paralyzed the organization. It's therefore an absolutely massive blow to the organization that will take considerable time for it to recover from. Having said that, Hezbollah is not a small militia. It's a very deeply entrenched and sophisticated organization that has been decades in the making. And I think one reason that this this series of assassinations culminating in the killing of its general secretary, one reason it's so significant is because part of Hezbollah's aura in recent years has been its counterintelligence capabilities. And compared to similar movements in the region, it's the perception that it was somehow very effective at preventing Israeli espionage and Israeli infiltration and so on. And so that doubles, let's say, the significance of these latest blows. But Hezbollah was decades in the making. It would take years of much more intensive efforts to dismantle it. And I think we need to look at this in several contexts. First is Israel's determination to de-link Lebanon from Gaza. And what it is seeking to do is to punish and weaken Hezbollah to the extent that it capitulates and renounces its support for the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, renounces what it calls its support front. And I think that these assassinations will make that more difficult rather than more easy to achieve. The second is that I think Israel, well, let me put it this way. If you accept that on the 7th of October of last year, Hamas launched its offensive into southern Israel in order to irrevocably shatter the status quo. Israel's campaign since then has been not to restore the status quo that existed on the 6th of October, but rather to fundamentally transform the strategic equation in the Middle East. And part of that is not only delinking Lebanon from Gaza, but dealing a mortal blow to Hezbollah as an organization so that it is no longer a significant military factor in the Middle East. And beyond that, to also find a way to administer a very significant blow against Iran. And I think for Israel, the road to Tehran leads through the southern suburbs of Beirut. And what it is hoping to do here is not just to hit Hezbollah, but to find a way to provoke the direct involvement of Iran into this conflict in a manner that can also produce a direct military confrontation between the United States and Iran. Whether this will succeed or not is difficult to say. But getting back to Hezbollah, I think, you know, its command has been either eliminated or paralyzed, but it has a very deep bench. And I suspect it will fairly quickly be able to regenerate the leadership. It will be a new generation of leadership. And as Ali Hashem, the correspondent of Al Jazeera based in Lebanon, who knows the organization quite well, has pointed out, Nasrallah was known as a strategic thinker, as someone who was playing the long game. And he may well now be replaced by a generation that is more fixated on revenge for the losses that it has suffered in the past several months. And I'd also like to, you know, in terms of Nasrallah himself, he was, of course, an iconic, charismatic figure who had kind of a deep personal bond, if you will, with his constituents, the type of historical leader that's going to be very difficult to replace. What one could compare him, for example, to Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt or Yasser Arafat's role within the Palestinian movement. And here I would point out that the loss of Nasser was a devastating loss to Egypt, obviously, when it happened in 1970. And he was replaced by Anwar Sadat, who Kissinger, for once rightly, denounced as a clown. But even this didn't prevent Egypt from 3 years later successfully crossing the Suez Canal. So yes, assassinations are painful, but the idea that these tactical successes can be transformed into strategic developments, I think will prove to be a mistaken assumption.
And in fact, we could see the precedent, of course, mission accomplished style triumphalism in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. And also, I suppose, I mean, in the case of Hezbollah, I mean, you know, you got to begin with, based on the subjugation of the Palestinian people, the birth of the PLO, the invasion of Lebanon, then Hezbollah, then, of course, emerges from that. But that point, Hezbollah, a lot of people in the West often don't realize it has this base within Lebanese society. It's in the government. It's in a coalition government. It has two ministries. So it's this idea, again, that you just cut off the top or the key kind of top leadership of an organization, as if that will then lead to its destruction, when actually, as you suggest, history suggests more radical elements often end up coming to the top.
Well, and let's take another example. Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad. It was a fairly small movement that was also led by a charismatic leader, Fathi Shqaqi. He was assassinated in Malta in 1995, and Israel for years held up Shqaqi's assassination as kind of a model of how one can effectively eliminate an organization by assassinating its leader. Well, guess what? Islamic Jihad not only participated prominently in the Palestinian offensive of 7th October last year, but is still fighting today in the Gaza Strip, and is today, I would argue, a much more powerful movement than it was when Shqaqi was assassinated. So yes, assassinations obviously have an impact, and they can present very serious setbacks to the organizations that suffer these losses. But I think in the larger framework of things, they tend to be tactical losses rather than presenting strategic transformations.
But before I ask about your thoughts on Iran, I mean, in terms of what's been happening as regards Hezbollah and Israel, again, a lot of, bizarrely, actually, the BBC did an analysis and they found 80% of the armed exchanges came from Israel rather than the other way around. But again, I mean, the way this is, what's your thoughts, just the reality versus the way a lot of this has been portrayed, I guess, by much of the Western media in particular over the last, that part of this horror show, I suppose, in the last year?
Well, of course, it is Hezbollah that initiated what it calls its support front on the 8th of October. And it did so with a very clear and explicit objective of supporting the Palestinians and exercising pressure on Israel to end its genocidal campaign against the Gaza Strip. This is often being presented as, you know, Hezbollah initiated an unprovoked armed conflict with Israel. Well, at some level, that's correct. But I find it a little curious that people who are entirely justifiably, have for 75 years, entirely justifiably decried the way the world abandoned the Jews of Europe in the 1930s and then during the Holocaust, are in the same breath condemning Hezbollah, condemning the Houthi movement in Yemen, and condemning others for taking active measures to support Palestinians when they are being subjected to a genocidal campaign by Israel. You can't have it both ways, I would argue. I would certainly agree with those who say that the European powers had every opportunity to prevent the Holocaust by actively confronting Hitler during his rise to power. But if you want to quite justifiably condemn that, I don't think you can also condemn those who have taken the choice to stand by the Palestinians when they are themselves being subjected to genocide. The other point, of course, as you pointed out, is the vast disparity of violence. I mean, if you look at kind of mainstream media reporting, you would think that Israel is being subjected to a 24/7 assault from Lebanon with all kinds of bombs and missiles and artillery and whatnot. And Israelis are basically helplessly huddling in their bomb shelters. Well, the reality is that Israel's levels of attacks on on Lebanon rather, has been exponentially higher. And although it is correct that the first shots in this particular round were fired by Hezbollah on October 8th of last year, every step up the escalation ladder has on the whole been at Israel rather than Hezbollah's initiative. And it has been, according to many analysts, Hezbollah rather than Israel that has operated with relative restraint, something we may no longer see as a result of developments yesterday. Because what has now happened is that rather than taking another few steps up the escalation ladder, Israel has basically detonated the ladder itself with high explosives.
But before I ask you about Gaza, just on Iran, what's your thoughts there in terms of what this means there? Because obviously, this is a big strategic defeat for Iran as well. Iran is talking about sending troops to Lebanon, particularly perhaps the borders with Syria, the Golan Heights. What's your thoughts on where this could lead, and whether or not the view basically of the Israeli state is they want this escalation, they will keep escalating it, that actually it's not actually in the interests of the US state, of US power, to have a massive regional escalation, and that they know that they can call the bluff of an administration which frankly doesn't really seem to have a functioning president at the helm, who in any case is ideologically one of the most pro-Israel presidents imaginable. What's your thoughts on where this leads?
I think it's a very good question. I mean, Hassan Nasrallah was, particularly after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Nasrallah was a very personification of the axis of resistance. And his assassination, therefore, as you know, represents a significant loss to Iran. I should add that there's a lot of misunderstanding about the axis of resistance. It is a coalition and not a formal alliance. Mm-hmm. And its various members have different relationships with Iran. I've suggested that we should, in this context, we should look at Iran as more the Germany of the European Union rather than the Soviet Union of the Warsaw Pact. In other words, it has various levels of interest, of influence over different members of this coalition in different periods of time, rather than being a pure center proxy relationship. As far as Iran itself, if you consider that Iran believes Israel is dead set on a direct confrontation with it, and if it also looks at the prospect of Trump returning to the White House, the same president who unilaterally renounced the 2015 nuclear agreement, I wouldn't at all be surprised if Iran now makes an accelerated push to cross the nuclear threshold, the kind of North Korean strategy to regime survival, if you will. It's possible that another lesson it draws from what has happened in Lebanon is that many people were suggesting that Hezbollah lost the initiative by not itself unilaterally attacking Israel in full force after October 7th. I don't think that was an option for a number of reasons. Hezbollah wasn't prepared to do so. Hezbollah had multiple considerations, domestic and regional, in devising its strategy. But nevertheless, For those who believe that Hezbollah's current dilemmas and difficulties and losses are a result of it not having taken the initiative, they may well now in Tehran be arguing that Iran should avoid getting stuck in the same conundrum and therefore should take the initiative. The difference, of course, is that Iran is a state. Iran has vital strategic, economic, and other assets that can be much more easily targeted by Israel than, for example, Hezbollah could. And this tension between the strategy of strategic patience, which Iran has been exercising, and the constant Israeli provocations against Iran during the past years are now coming to a head. And Iran is faced, I think, with a fundamental choice about how it wants to move forward, particularly where it is seeking to portray itself in the region, as the state that stands up to Israel and is constantly criticizing and belittling others for not doing the same. Well, it's going one way or the other. It's going to have to put its money where its mouth is.
On Gaza, so we've had now nearly a year of this genocidal campaign by Israel. And there was, it's not surprising, it's an interesting revelation, and it's linked as well to what's been going on in terms of the International Criminal Court. ProPublica, a US investigative media outlet, did a long piece which exposed the fact that US aid, its international development agency led by Samantha Power, Barack Obama's former ambassador to the United Nations, made clear, as well as the refugee department, I think of the State Department, that Israel was deliberately preventing aid from getting into Gaza. Now, anyone who, obviously it's frustrating that we know that's happening. That's obvious. There's been a siege of Gaza, which has led to a famine and all the dire consequences of that siege. But the fact is, the US law means that it cannot provide military assistance to states which prevent US-backed humanitarian aid from entering. Antony Blinken was told about these assessments and clearly refused to act on them. And there's also further revelations, I think, in The Atlantic, which is a kind of very centrist pro-Israel publication edited by a former IDF soldier.
A prison guard.
An IDF prison guard, you're quite right. Which is that Netanyahu apparently admitted that there was a siege, I don't know, to Biden or Blinken, and blamed it on his coalition partners, saying they won't even let an aspirin in. But that's a confession from the Israeli state that there is that siege. Because the ICC's, the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor's request for arrest warrants is actually primarily based on the siege. It hasn't gone further into those other charges based on the fact partly there isn't you need to be on the ground in theory to accumulate evidence, whether you believe that or not. They haven't gone as far as they should have gone. What's your thoughts about that, these revelations and what they mean?
Well, can I just start by saying that another Israeli objective regarding Lebanon is reflected precisely in this discussion that we're having. It's only now that we're turning our attention to the Gaza Strip, and I'm sure there are numerous other conversations and interviews taking place around the world where the focus is very much on Lebanon and has been for the past week, and kind of the root of all evil, if you will, Israel's genocidal onslaught on the Gaza Strip is either not mentioned at all, or, in our case, because we have the time and interest to explore these things, coming in well into the conversation. But this is an absolutely crucial issue you're raising. Not only has Israel's medieval siege on the Gaza Strip been an absolutely horrendous violation of international law and the laws of war, constituting a series of war crimes and crimes against humanity, but it is also, as you know, a violation of US domestic legislation, which states very clearly that the United States cannot provide military aid to a state which is obstructing the delivery of humanitarian aid by the United States. And as these documents make clear, this is exactly what the Biden administration and particularly Secretary of State Antony Blinken was being told by his bureaucracy. And he then turned around and certified that Israel was in fact behaving in accordance with international law or not violating U.S. law, and therefore billions. Therefore, he could sign off on billions more of weapons deliveries to Israel. And I think this tells us several things. One is that this administration is ideologically invested in Israel to a degree that we have never before seen, even by U.S. standards. You mentioned Reagan. We can even mention Trump. You know, there's a tradition that when every U.S. president leaves the White House, he's lauded in Israel as the most pro-Israeli president that Israel has ever had. That's certainly going to be the case with Biden. But I think the next president will have a lot of difficulty exceeding that threshold and being described as even more pro-Israeli than Joe Biden. So it shows how absolutely determined the United States is to ensure that Israel gets everything it needs. Second, it shows that as far as Washington is concerned, there will be absolutely no restraints whatsoever on Israel. Israel has a carte blanche from Washington to behave as it pleases, violating not only international law, but also U.S. domestic legislation. And there will be absolutely no consequences of any sort for Israel from doing so. And this, thirdly, of course, this shows the total contempt for Palestinian Arab life more generally, that I think is a hallmark of the generation of U.S. political leaders, which these administration officials and Biden in particular represent. And again, I think one more element is that, as so often, it's the bureaucracy and the civil servants that get things right. But it also shows that their political influence, their ability to affect decision-making, is slim to none when it comes to politicians and leaders and decision-makers who are dead set upon a certain course of action.
Just because it's a year on, I just wanted to ask some, just into focusing on Gaza. And you're absolutely right. It's so important that we focus on that as the root of all the evil we're discussing here. Just obviously notwithstanding the fact we just the onslaught, this particular onslaught on Beirut yesterday. I mean, with the International Criminal Court, it's now been it's 4 months since the request was issued by the chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, for those arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, for both war crimes and crimes against humanity. And for those who aren't familiar with the process or have forgotten, there's now the pre-trial chamber judges, the 3 judges who have to approve those requests. I guess, I mean, I don't know if it's any, gets in ways it's pointless to talk about. I mean, it's just your thoughts. We know there's a history of Israel intimidating the predecessor of Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor.
And the United States.
And the United States, very important point. And we know that's happened since, in terms of what the US has said. We know there's been pressure, and Karim Khan has publicly alluded to the pressure on him. What's your thoughts on what's going on with the foot dragging? And do you think, what are your thoughts, what could lie behind it?
Well, I think everything you've said is correct, but it's also my view that the ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan, is playing a fairly nefarious role in all of this. He's been dragging his feet on the ICC investigation of the situation in Palestine from the moment he was appointed in 2021 until developments in the last year left him with no choice. And then in May, he did something which was quite extraordinary, which was that rather than present his application for arrest warrants confidentially to the pretrial chamber, the panel of 3 judges that decide on whether or not to issue those arrest warrants, he announced them publicly before the pretrial chamber had an opportunity to take a decision on his application. And in doing so, created the opportunity for first the British government, then the German government, and then a slew of others to submit briefs to the ICC either for or against these arrest warrants on various grounds. And what it has done is created an opportunity of several months now, and I suppose this will go on for several more months, during which the ICC refrains from taking a decision, almost praying that there's some, development that will allow it not to take a decision. So I don't think the office of the ICC prosecutor has been innocent in all this. It's quite clear that as far as Khan is concerned, he needs this case like he needs a hole in the head, and is doing everything possible to hide behind process, to seek to prevent this coming to a conclusion. So, in the case of Putin, I think it took 2 weeks or 2 months, I'm not exactly sure, for the pretrial chamber to come to a determination. And there was no public announcement or fanfare before that chamber had decided. So here the public announcement that the panel of judges was being asked to issue a determination on the applications for arrest warrant created this mess we're currently in.
That notwithstanding, do you think, we have seen this year Israeli impunity, which just seems, unassailable for so long, crumble. And we saw that with the International Criminal Court of Justice, the world's highest court, their sweeping judgment on Israel's occupation and colonization, theft of Palestinian land, which was far more sweeping than a lot of people, I think, anticipated. I think it was very much at the better end, basically, or the highest possible expectations were basically met, I would say. I don't know if you think that's reasonable. What do you think about that? Because summarize what they said, but also what you think the significance of that was. It's an advisory opinion based on the UN General Assembly. This is before 7 years ago now, not that many years ago, asking for the highest court, the ICJ, to make its advisory opinion. So it was only going to be advisory in that sense. But what's your thoughts on what it represents?
Well, I think it's extraordinarily significant, and I fully concur with you that the advisory opinion exceeded the expectations of those who were seeking it. Formally, it is an advisory opinion, but it's a ruling, and it's called an advisory opinion because that's the description given to any ruling requested from this court by the General Assembly. And what this effectively means is that the international community asked the world's highest court to issue a ruling on the status of Israeli rule in the occupied Palestinian territories. And the ruling was that Israel's very presence in those territories is illegal and unlawful and illegitimate, that UN member states are under a positive obligation not only to bring this to an end, but also to ensure that any of their dealings with Israel in no way contribute to the continuation of occupation. And I should add, this ruling can effectively applies just as much to the occupied Syrian Golan Heights. And what it effectively means is that this 3 decades long charade that we have been experiencing, known as the Oslo Accords, where Palestinian rights have to constantly be negotiated under US supervision and are constantly subject to an Israeli veto, that has all been rendered irrelevant because the court quite clearly said that Palestinians have inalienable rights, that these rights are not subject to negotiations, and that therefore Israel is under an obligation to withdraw to the 1967 boundaries, with or without an agreement, with or without a diplomatic charade. And I think just as importantly, the UN General Assembly recently adopted a resolution in response to this ruling, where it not only reaffirmed its main points, but also stated quite explicitly what is expected of UN member states in order to transform this ruling into a reality. Of course, there's an important point to be made here, which is that this is not a national court that can kind of throw handcuffs on a criminal and throw him in prison. Neither the International Court of Justice nor the UN General Assembly have enforcement mechanisms for such rulings. And but nevertheless, I think politically it is an extraordinarily important and significant development.
Before I ask my final question, I did want to ask you about this, given it's been a year on now of this, some of the worst atrocities committed in the 21st century, live streamed on a daily basis. A reminder, unfortunately, not that the history of our species needs it, of the capacity for depravity which exists in terms of human violence. And it's this, you know, I've talked about, I call it genocidal mania. You know, the radicalization of Israeli society, where obviously there's already huge embedded structural racism, which you get if you're in that's what happens with colonization. That's what happens with occupation. You have to, if you're subjugating entire people, you have to strip them of their humanity. I mean, that's the history of colonialism. It's the British Empire, you know, all the other European empires, and all the hideous violence which they perpetrated, which they justified based on the inferiority of those that they were subjugating. But I mean, it is a case study, a disturbing case study, a warning from history of what can happen. And there are courageous Israelis. I interview them on this channel, and I'll keep doing so. And they're courageous because they're so isolated. And if you look at the polling of Israeli society, it's gruesome. If you take out the Palestinian citizens of Israel, you know, about half the Jewish Israelis are evenly divided, whether not enough firepower is being used in Gaza or just the right amount. 60% consistently oppose all humanitarian aid entering Gaza, which would mean, if anyone thought about it for more than 3 seconds, everyone dying in Gaza. And we can see discussions on television where people talk about killing children because they'll end up being terrorists anyway. Where you see the way that soldiers post their genocidal sentiments, where, you know, the brace position we all have to do when we click on an Israeli tweet and we click on the translate from Hebrew, and then just see just some hideous, depraved, genocidal screed. Is it a politician? Is it a soldier? Is it a journalist? Is it an ordinary citizen? I mean, what does this tell us? This genocidal mania which grips Israeli society, where genocidal sentiments are pervasive, widespread, legitimized from top to bottom.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. I believe it's Diana Butu who has characterized Israel as having become a genocidal society. Of course, as you yourself mentioned, there are dissidents, there are courageous voices, very beleaguered ones, I should add. Mm. But if we look at it at a societal level, I think it's indeed fair and accurate to characterize Israel in 2024 as a genocidal society. Quite different than, for example, France during the Algerian War, or the United States during the Vietnam War. There are parallels historically. Let's not get into those now, but I think, you know, we were speaking earlier about the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon. Well, that created something that created and strengthened what was known as the Israeli peace movement. Then you had mass demonstrations opposed to the war and opposed to the Israeli government's role in the Sabra Shatila massacre. In 2024, we also have demonstrations, even riots, not against the war and genocide, but pro-rape, defending the right of Israeli soldiers to gang rape Palestinian prisoners. I don't know if there's any parallel to that. You know, the Israelis are really living in an alternate reality. I think they're getting a very different version of reality than the rest of us are. And in the way reality is presented to them is they're the real victims here. it's not the victims of genocide who are being wronged. They're the real victims here. And as I think also Diana Buttu put it, from their perspective, nothing justifies October 7th, but October 7th justifies everything. So it's impossible to argue with this kind of, as you put it so accurately, genocidal mania.
Just my final question. The US election now is just over a month away. It's not that far. We're now on the 28th of September. It's on the 4th of November. Just finally, I mean, where do you see this heading based on, there are two different scenarios, obviously. Donald Trump gets elected or Kamala Harris. And what's your thoughts about I'll leave that's the question.
Yeah, well, just a final point on my previous
of course, yeah.
Because I think it's relevant to what you just asked. I mean, we can't look at Israel and Israeli society in isolation.
Of course, yeah.
One thing we've learned during the past year is its extraordinary dependence on the West and the US in particular. And I think it's kind of this vicious cycle where the West's insistence on Israeli impunity pushes Israeli society ever further to the right. So it's very organically related. Regarding the impact of the U.S. election, I think it's difficult to say. What I will say is that I believe the Biden administration, and particularly Biden personally, has been a uniquely pro-Israeli figure in U.S. presidential history. And I think that either Harris or Trump will represent, let's say, a return to the traditional U.S. policy of unconditional support for Israel, as opposed to this hysterical devotion to anything and everything Israel does that Biden represents. And I think that the Israeli government, and Netanyahu in particular, although he does have a clear preference for Trump over Harris, also recognizes that the remaining months of the Biden administration represent a unique opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Israel to fundamentally transform the strategic equation in the Middle East with unconditional and unrestrained U.S. support, because I think Israel also understands that, rhetorically speaking, Trump may be much more pro-Israeli, but he's also much more unpredictable. With Trump, you never know what he's going to do tomorrow morning. Harris, I think, will represent a much more traditional policy of, on the one hand, unconditional support for Israel, on the other hand, also a willingness at the extremes to place certain restraints upon Israel that have been entirely absent during the past year from the Biden administration.
Well, we're soon going to find out, aren't we?
Cool food. Follow me.